Hello guys. Welcome to Ani Fanfics. How are you all? So in this video we will see the second part of What If Naruto Was an Angel of God. But before we start, be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin the story. The boy wearily spooned himself a bit of cereal as he recalled the past 2 weeks.
His dreams, as they were, continued to haunt him. Images of terror, gore, and pain flashed through his mind like a horror track.
And the screams. Oh, how those poor souls didn't deserve what he'd done to them. No one deserves what happens to you down in the pit. He remembered a point where he'd pleaded them to stop. They declined. Later, he'd asked them to let him just put the poor man out of his misery. They declined once more, but told him that it was impossible. One cannot kill the damned, but he didn't believe them. He'd stabbed the frightened soul with his tools of torture given to him by the ones that once tortured him. But try as he may, the man didn't die. In fact, he'd made it worse, for the poor man's soul kept coming back to life, kept regenerating due to some unseen force. And it was at that point that the blonde knew that he'd traded one torture for another. Though he no longer felt the pain of being tortured himself, the guilt of doing to those that had been done to him had remained. And though he was far from the devil's gates, the guilt remained. There was absolutely no difference between that realm and this. He still felt the shame, thus his torture has continued even in rebirth. He shook away his dark thoughts as he refocused on his bowl. Another spoonful, another day. It had been 2 weeks now since his rebirth. He hadn't had any sleep the first week, but had managed to sneak a few hours the last one. Eventually he'd get used to these hauntings. He had to. He'd begged to whatever unseen force out there for it. He cracked his neck at the memories of the past 2 weeks. It was a nightmare. More ways than one. Hunter training was far worse than any type of training he'd imagined, far worse than any physical pain he'd felt in the natural realm.
Each and every repetition, every push, every struggle served to both root itself into his combative prowess and sear his muscles with white-hot intensity.
But still, hellfire was far worse, as each second in hell was like standing in the bottom of an active volcano.
He'd reminded himself all throughout the 2 weeks that whatever form of punishment he'd receive would never be as bad as hell.
Ever. Now he was living a life of luxury, given that he'd worked his ass up, till the bone, of course.
He was so used to living the life of a beggar, always haggling for the price of his clothing and always relying on the Ichirakus to give him his daily staple.
His year spent in the pit hadn't done him justice either. The first week living here was such a drastic lifestyle change. He'd found himself at awe each time he'd enter the room on several occasions. But now, he knew that wasting his time on admiring his present home would hinder his focus. Focus was one of the things his teachers demanded of him, as well as his loyalty in his body. One of Karu's stupid jokes, he guessed. He tried to wash the memories away of both training and hell with a glass of water. He then looked down at his bowl, only to see that the bran had already softened. How long had it been? He looked out the kitchen's carved windows to see that almost an hour had passed since his last spoonful. It was okay. He was far too tired to eat anyways. He then carried his bowl to the sink and made his way to the training grounds, where one of his masters, Karu, would be waiting for him.
This was his daily routine, training in combative jutsu and the combative arts with Kuro, then spending some quality time learning about hunting with Lyato. His excitement betrayed his physical pain, as the hunters were exactly what he'd imagined them to be. They were powerful, even more so than anyone he'd ever met. But something about one of the hunters, the one called Genma, seemed very strange. Hadn't he seen him before? Never mind that, he thought. He had training to do. Flashback. So, the hunter gave the sitting blonde an icy glare. We heard from Jiraiya-sama that you have nowhere else to go, that your only path now is to become what I am. A hunter. Now, tell me why exactly you think that excuse is good enough for training you. Sure, we don't mind having you around, but what in your right mind believes that you deserve to be a part of us? Why shouldn't we make you our servant instead of having you as a part of our own? I'll work hard, the boy said adamantly. A ferocious determination etched its way towards Lyato's hard looks. I know I can do it. I've been protecting people that haven't given a damn about me my entire life. There's no way I'd stop now. The tall hunter snorted, like we give a damn about your goals. What we care about is if you have the constitution and the focus to share my profession."
The boy growled under his breath, not caring if the taller man heard or not.
He was still pissed at how the pervert and his friend left him alone the morning after they came.
The only things they'd left him were his ninja tools and the necklace the old hag had given him. He'd missed her, but those bastards would pay for not giving him a proper farewell, for he knew that it'd be a long time until he'd see anyone with a Konoha headband.
After waking up, he'd found that his old clothes were gone, only to be replaced by a black training GI. At the hunter's request, he was taken down to the quiet room, only to sit in the middle of the fucking floor and get interrogated by Bigfoot himself. The TWP stared each other, not breaking contact, until Lyato chose to initiate. "So, tell me, why exactly you want to become a hunter?" The man stated condescendingly. "I've already told you why, it is my destiny." The older man interrupted as he lowered his face to meet the boy's defiant glare. "You think that just because a so-called angel raised you from the dead and spoke nonsense about your destiny, you think we'd oblige to an institute we have no idea about? We don't even know if what they say is true, or what their true intentions are. We don't even know how the hell we'd defend against them should they launch on us an attack." Hell, Naruto thought as his teeth began to grind. He hated that word.
"Do you even know what a hunter's job requires?" The man aggressively continued as he squatted to reach eye level, allowing for the two to exchange looks, Naruto with his hot fury, and Lyato with his icy contempt.
"No, I don't. That's right, because you're far too weak to and too stupid to deserve to know about what we do. I bet all the people you knew before deserve to be hunters more than you since all the time in hell made you sloppy. It's probably too late for you to even catch up to them." "Look, now," the boy stood up. For some reason, even with the lack of whiskers and fangs, his glare was still as ferocious as ever. "I know next thing to nothing about you assholes, but I know you could hold your own in a fight. I didn't come here to be trained as a killer or some sort of a super-powered hero. I just want to be good enough that I could protect the people that matter, even if they don't know I exist. I don't even give a damn if they know who I am because helping people is the only way I can be satisfied." Impressed, the man motioned for the boy to sit on his personal couch. The boy complied, but he remained standing. "That's good, but you still have no clue as to what we do, don't you? Uzumaki-san, do you know what the supernatural is?"
The boy, surprised at the man's sudden gentleness, replied quite coherently, "Like ghosts and air, demons and stuff." The man laughed, "Not just that. There's much more than just ghosts and demons out there. I'll explain to you about that later on. What a hunter does is simple. We hunt down creatures. Ones that aren't normal. Why? Because we have to keep a sort of balance."
"The heck is this balance? Let me ask you this, Uzumaki-san, have you ever seen a ghost? A vampire? God? No. Well, that just means we're doing a good job." "What?" the boy asked, hungry for more knowledge. "Where are you going with this?" "The reason why you've never seen them before, the reason why anyone has met them, is because of us. Hunters. We've worked in hiding for thousands of years to make sure no one has to deal with the crap we deal with on a daily basis. We hunt so that no one would feel the pain of losing someone to beings that they could never hope to defend against." The gray-clad hunter took a breath, "And with all that said, what makes you think that you have what it takes to become a hunter? Letting you live was the first rule we broke. We're okay with that, as we can keep tabs on you easily should we make you our servant. But we broke the second rule, breaking the balance by confiding in you the existence of the paranormal. I should kill you right now in the name of protecting our identities, you know. Look, I know I have more than a year's worth of training to catch up with, but I've seen these demons and I know what they are capable of. I'm sure I can be of use to you just as long as I can kill a fair share of my own. I won't hesitate, I won't lose my focus, and I won't give up during training. Shit, I'll probably be begging you guys every morning to hurry up to train me if you start slacking. The point is, I'm ready to give up my past life. I'm still considered dead, I don't exist. I'm sure that can be of great use to you. Is there anything else you want me to say?" "No." The man smiled as he patted the boy's mucky hair. "Come on, before we teach you, you'll need yourself a bath." ****** End flashback ******. Naruto made his way out the kitchen's white, wooden door and flinched at the sun's glare. He grew used to the beauty of the estate, so he quickly made his way through the controlled flora and fauna, and headed towards the stable before venturing to the base of the mountain where the hallowed training grounds lay. He was told that the garden was tended to by a select few from the vassal village, Ashigari Township. The stable, however, was off limits to the gardeners, and only the hunters and he were allowed to approach it. He unfurled a ball of cloth to reveal a freshly baked loaf of country bread. He then made kissing noises. "Lady, come play." Not a moment too soon, the Fenrir cub that Kuro had taken in at the same time as he playfully dashed towards him, saliva dripping as she pounced on him. His masters were right, she did grow fast. She was now twice the size of an average dog, able to stand 1.5 feet taller than him should she stand on 2 feet. As soon as she was close to meeting him, he quickly spun to the side whilst dropping the loaf of bread. The she-Fenrir huffed in happiness as she caught it in midair and gracefully landed with the agility of a cat. Such was their daily routine. "All right, that's enough." The boy squatted down to pet Lady's beautiful coat of silver. "I have to go train now. You should go back into the stable before the gardeners see you." "Whoa." The cub then playfully dug her snout between Naruto's legs, forcing him to sit awkwardly on her back, before taking off towards the training grounds with him along. It wasn't long before they reached the league of stairs up on the mountain's base and climbed. As they ascended up the stairs, Naruto could only gaze in quiet apprehension as the boldness of Mt. Ashigari became more pronounced with each elevated gallop. The pearly whites of the snow, the grays of the carved rock, and the tones of the earth sang out in one harmonious symphony that displayed the great rock's majesty. He'd never get used to the beauty of this. And at the bottom of this great mountain stood the hallowed ground of the Ninomiya clan's training grounds, surrounding the entire mountain's base. They consisted of several dozen pieces of land, each nearly a half-mile apart, and each the size of nearly 1 league. The grounds were considered hallowed because many believed they had powers. There was once an accident where the monsters of the mansion had a brief scuffle with some invading ninjas who hoped to steal Kumogica's secrets. The conclusion was disastrous, having scarred the inn greatly, leaving several nearby hot springs polluted, and causing for the local wildlife to rot.
But the morning after, it was found that the grounds became new again, as if the accident hadn't occurred. The magic of the Ninomiya training grounds attracted many ninjas, even from the neighboring villages, but no one thought to enter the one nearest to the vassal village, the one located directly above the Ninomiya clan mansion, the house where the monsters sleep. As soon as they finished conquering the stairs, Lady and Naruto met Kuro, who was going through the motions of a dance he recently made with his blessed Shikuto. He'd had it for about a year, so he'd considered it his partner in crime, his most reliable comrade. The hunter stopped his fluid-like movements as soon as he heard the sounds of barking and yelling. He turned around to see the bleached blonde stepping off his ride and pat down his clothing. "I'm glad you actually came in on time today. I got something special to teach you, kid." "Cool." The boy bowed respectfully before entering the hallowed grounds before he walked towards the center of the stone surface. He kneeled down on his knees out of respect for his master and waited for him to continue.
"Okay, so for the past 2 weeks I've gotten you to recondition yourself, making you relearn everything you've ever learned in combat, with the help of your shadow clones of course. You've done a kick-ass job so far, kid, but you still have a ways to go." He continued after receiving a nod from his disciple. "Now, it won't take long before you get back into shape, but I bet you're wondering about how you could catch up to those you knew from before. In your past life, I mean." "That's right. Well, you can forget about that," the man laughed after receiving a surprised look from the boy. "As you know, shadow clone training helps you speed up training a bit, so you'll have no problem catching up and even surpassing those from your grade. The problem, however, is that you need actual combat experience instead of having to repeat the motions of your katas in a controlled environment. It is only then that we'll be able to know the extent of your abilities. But never mind that, let's get you warmed up, kid. Now, I assume you've done your stretches beforehand." "Good."
1 minute. The boy queried. 1 minute. The man agreed. "No jutsu, chakra and weapons allowed." The man discarded his black training GI, as did the boy, revealing black tattoos on both of their lean forms.
Naruto had been outfitted with storage seals and weight seals as soon as his first day of training had ended. Along his arms and his legs and his chest, a web of small notches were stained. These almost invisible lines of death were seals that stored some of the ninja tools that Jiraiya had left him, and on the rest of the storage seals were some weapons that Genma had made for him as well. On his chest and his back and his limbs laid a blazing inferno of black fire. His weight seals. Altogether, it weighed about 50 pounds. Not as intense as the seals on his masters, but it was a very good start since he'd just put them on nearly 2 weeks ago.
On the center of his lean chest, however, was a tattoo of the gem of the necklace he was left with.
It was a storage seal for the prized necklace that was worth an entire mountain. With it, he could probably have bought his way back into Konoha. But, he knew that such a thing would disrespect his memory of the old hag. He took the necklace out every night when he'd brewed or when he was down. The memories of the past had in fact not haunted him, but it had helped him remember all the obstacles he had overcome. It encouraged him that he'd overcome many more.
The two males settled in relaxed stances. Karoo knew that the boy's taijutsu was much better than it was when he'd first came. He was faster, more efficient, not relying on just brute strength like he did in the past. The boy was the first to move, using a bit of chakra to hasten his steps.
He aimed an open fist towards the older man's ear, but the man's forearm collided with it in retaliation. After the collision, Naruto had appeared behind the man and launched a roundhouse to his leg, hoping to cripple him before finishing him off. However, a hand caught the leg before it could connect to Kuro's own. A moment later, Naruto found himself thrown 10 feet away. He quickly caught himself midair, and as soon as he touched the ground, he disappeared. Kuro looked about before he rolled forwards, narrowly missing the boy's attack from above. Naruto unsealed 2 kunai, and ran towards his master whilst growling in frustration. "Control your emotions," the man said as he parried the boy's strikes with his Chikudo's sheath. Without his white face mask, it was easy to see that the man truly relished battle. He didn't at all try to hide his amusement as the Naruto's attempts, one after another, failed to meet him.
Naruto then jumped, span in midair and unleashed a volley of shuriken that were headed for his master.
The man tried to move away, but he found that the 2 kunai that his disciple had previously equipped were pinning each of his boots to the cracked, stone ground. He disappeared in a cloud of smoke just before the shuriken managed to pierce him. Naruto heard the sounds of metal meeting rock and readied himself. He waited and found that, when the smoke cleared, his master's boots remained. Not a moment too soon, he felt a pang of white-hot pain colliding with his back, the force pushing him forward in an almighty shove. Because his eyes were closed at the pain, he didn't see Kuro in front of him as the man delivered a kick to his solar plexus. The kick was controlled enough that it didn't break his ribcage upon contact, but hard enough that it knocked the air out of him and pushed him back from whence he came. The boy got up and found his master putting back on one of his black combat boots. He was just about to put the other one on before Lady ran up to him and playfully tried to pounce on him. "No, Lady, I'm busy." Naruto used this diversion as a chance to finally connect. He disappeared right behind his master, then in front of him, then in the air above, and kept doing so until the Fenrir cub was able to get out of the way. Eventually a punch aimed for the side of the man's head was caught, forcing the boy to cringe at the THR hunter's would-be counterattack. "The minute's over, kid." The man smirked. The boy was improving. Such tactics were considered underhanded, but in a real-life situation, such schemes were the difference between life and death. The boy groaned before Karoo placed him back on the ground. He sat back down, his body now in lotus position. He was actually impressed at how he came so close to finally hitting his master. "Jutsu time?" "Yep," the older male licked his lips. "Jutsu time. Today, we'll be doing something different. Instead of practicing your chakra controlling techniques, you'll be learning your elements." To this, the boy jumped up from his seated position and chirped, "Cool, so I'll be learning how to make meteors and tornadoes and all that." "No, not today, kid." The man's smile dampened when the boy's shoulders drooped down in sadness. "Baby steps, kid. Before teaching you all those awesome techniques, we'll still need you to know what your element is first. Here, take this chakra litmus paper. It'll tell you what your element is. All you have to do is to focus your chakra into it until something happens to it. Got it?" "Alright," the boy muttered, his mood now dampened due to having his hopes crushed. When he took the paper, he focused some of his chakra into it.
He noticed that it had not only split into two, but each half began to burn in a light blaze. He sighed in awe.
That looks like good news, the man smiled impressed. Usually people have an affinity for just one element when they start off, but you have an affinity for two. This is really good, since I, myself, am a master in fire jutsu, and Genma is pretty okay in wind too. I guess we'll be having ourselves some good times, won't we?
What do you mean about affinities? The boy tried to hide his excitement. You'll still be able to learn techniques from other elements, but learning them would take you many months, even if they're just simple techniques. The elements you have an affinity for, however, cuts that time in half, maybe even less depending on how in tune you are with your elements. Awesome. The boy smiled in satisfaction. He truly couldn't wait until he'd truly learn about his elements.
Yeah, tell me about it, the man sighed as he recalled memories about his father. Anyways, I won't be teaching you any jutsu techniques today, or give you any jutsu controlling exercises, since we'll be needing you to be in proper shape for the hunt tomorrow. You can get over to the library now if you're ready. Lyoto's been there studying up on necromancy and all that undeath crap.
Why don't you study up with him? The boy had always wondered why this man had only devoted himself in combat training.
I wasn't made to study, kid, only fight. You'll learn that soon enough tomorrow.
Without wasting any time, the boy nodded to his master before reaching the stairs. He bowed before leaving the training grounds and walked with Lady back to the mansion. The big cub trotted about in front of him with her tail wagging about.
He was slightly upset at how today's lesson with Kuro was shortened quite significantly.
Usually, the taijutsu portion of the lesson would take nearly an hour, and the jutsu training took pretty much half the day. Perhaps his master had to do some preparation for the upcoming hunt. Just last week he saw both his masters filling in paperwork for a hunt they did in Kumogica, and Aobi had to take their place in training him that day. It didn't matter what job it was, he deduced sadly, paperwork would always fit a way to rear its head around the corner. As soon as he finally reached the kitchen, he went down the marble staircase and into the basement.
But, it wouldn't be accurate to call it a basement, but rather a facility, for it was a complex series of hallways and rooms that stretched as far as completely filling out the inside of MT.
Ashigari. It is easy to say that the mansion's exterior and its property is huge, but saying so would merely be the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the mansion's marble floors were levels and levels of floors, reaching nearly half a mile beneath the surface, and completely filling in the interior of the hollowed-out mountain. The only reason why no one was stupid enough to climb the mountain and discover the existence of the complex was because the hunters had already fabricated a tale, beforehand, of an evil being inhabiting it. The scare at the heart of the village below, 2 weeks prior, helped the tale spread even more. The complex was used for mainly three things: a storage for the many trinkets and materials they'd robbed the hides of baddies they'd encountered over the years, as Lyoto's private training ground, and as a library, an archive of sorts, which contained a collection of tomes, scrolls, and other such publications on the supernatural. He'd no idea where they'd gotten all the books, but the idea still stands: knowledge is power, and the hunters had a lot of knowledge. With Lady still by his side, Naruto finished descending down the wide, yet winding staircase. As he climbed down, he noticed that the walls took on a lifelessly grayer tone, as opposed to the marble white that adorned most of the mansion's upper floors. This part of the mansion, Lyoto's domain, wasn't built for show, but for efficiency and practicality. Instead of the heads of exotic creatures, signs now hung on the wall, telling him which room is which. He followed the main passage, the large, bland corridor, towards the main library, which was Lyoto's personal study. It was also the area where the blonde would go to, after a hard day's work at the training grounds, to learn a great deal of hunter know-how. There were many other libraries and archive rooms within the enormous complex, but the one he was headed to right now was the most diverse, and the largest, as well. As soon as he reached the library, Lady sped off to meet Lyoto, who'd stationed himself somewhere in the large room, past all the walls of text. The study looked similar to the quiet room, but shared the same pattern as the rest of the rooms in the complex by not having the presence of creatures attached to the mauve-stained walls. Instead, the walls were hung with old portraits and ancient texts, carefully framed in glass like exhibits. Naruto walked past row after row of books the size of his chest. Each bookshelf, he'd recognized, were roughly the same height as a house. Rolling ladders could be found by each bookshelf for easy use of the library.
He'd come to love them as Naruto would send him on errands from time to time to do research of his own on the paranormal. He later found Lady standing on 2 feet with her gigantic claws clutching on to the table Naruto was currently occupying. An array of open and closed books could be seen on his desk. Probably the research on the undeath, Naruto chanced.
Ah, Uzumaki-san, you've arrived. The man smiled as he lifted his head from a tome he'd been sticking his nose in for quite some time. You've come a lot earlier than usual. Yeah, Kuru sent me here after showing me what my elements are. Turns out that I'm fire and wind.
Really, now, it's quite rare to see a person able to use 2 elements that can easily complement each other in battle. You're quite the lucky kid. Kuro's probably doing paperwork for the upcoming hunt for a change. Usually, he leaves me with all the work. But anyways, I've prepared a small scroll for you. Here, sit down. The boy sat down and waited until his master cleared up the table. The man then produced a tattered scroll from inside his pocket. It was laminated, no doubt to protect it from the terrors of direct lighting and air. The boy was told that such elements were no doubt the steps that lead to the destruction of ancient, but important documents such as this. Naruto, after receiving the tiny parchment, unfurled it and laid it across the large, oaken table. It was labeled, How to Exorcise a Ghost. I want you to read it out loud. The first paragraph only, please. Naruto delighted as he stood beside his student. Research was one of the greatest joys in his life. He was definitely one who'd get out of his way to quench the thirst of his hunger for knowledge. And because of that, sharing that experience, to him at least, was even more satisfying than just learning by himself.
The boy cleared his throat before diving into the plastic-coated wall of text.
How to Exorcise a Ghost, Entry Number 1. Exorcism is the practice of evicting demons or other supernatural beings from a vessel, or from the living plane of existence. But to properly exorcise a ghost is one of the most common skills in a hunter's arsenal. Take note that a ghost is an intangible being, able to possess both creatures and objects alike. You cannot touch it, but it can harm you. There are different types of ghosts. It is apparent that they all exist for 2 reasons, one of them being unfinished business.
Okay, Naruto started. We've received news from the conclave that your first hunt will take place in Kumogica. Rumors around there state that a specter of some kind inhabits one of the buildings there. One of the older ones, of course.
It's always the older, more darker buildings, right? The boy smiled.
The older man snorted in amusement. Yeah, now that I think about it. But anyways, you'll need to do this by yourself. We'll help only when asked, but we'll evaluate your performance so we can see where you stand. Based on your performance, we'll decide how hard and how intense we'll need to train you before the hunt. Oh, so we're going on another mission right after the one tomorrow? No, not a hunt, but the hunt. Think of it as a Chunin exam for hunters, but with a flair. But forget about that for now. Just focus on studying for your performance evaluation tomorrow.
So, as you've already read, a ghost is intangible. It can go through obstacles of any kind and can even possess things if you're not careful. But what the text forgot to state is that ghosts are able to use abilities they had when they were alive. Here's an example, for instance. Imagine Kuro, only it is impossible to hit him, and he has the powers of possession and can be undetectable at any instant. Also, he can go through walls, and has near superhuman strength.
How the heck do you expect me to fight a ghost then? The boy asked, with a flash of fear in his deep blues. You don't. He said bluntly, crossing his arms as he began to lean on the table. Exorcising isn't fighting. It's impossible to fight a ghost. Sure, you can stall them for a bit, but they'll only end up killing you if you're not prepared.
So how do I get prepared? Good question. Here, the older man unsealed a rucksack labeled, Exorcism, and produced from it a box the size of one of a tome. This here's rock salt. It acts as a ward against ghosts of any kind, as well as other creatures that don't belong to this realm. I'll show you how to use it. The man pierced a hole into the box with the nearby pencil and walked into an open space between 2 rows of bookshelves and shook the box, forming a large circle, almost 3 meters in diameter around him. It is impossible for a ghost to physically pass this circle and possess or harm me. However, a long-range jutsu, and maybe even a thrown object can still harm me. And although exorcising a demon is an entirely different thing altogether, once you can get enough rock salt into a possessed demon vessel's body, then the demon is as good as gone. But how do you exorcise a ghost? Lyato then went outside the salt circle he fashioned and walked back to Naruto's side. Read the last paragraph out loud. The boy cleared his throat out for a final time. Although harming a ghost is nearly impossible, it is still possible for hunters to exorcise them. On top of unfinished business, all ghosts are anchored through one thing: bodily remains. If a hunter can burn these remains, then the ghost will be properly exorcised. Well, there you go, Lyato sighed in content. That's how you exorcise a ghost. I'll do some paperwork of my own in the quiet room, but you'll need to stay here and clean up all the salt.
But before the man could take off, Naruto stopped him. Wait a minute. What if I don't have a fire source ready for burning the remains? What do I do then?
Truth be told, Lyato was waiting for the boy to ask that sort of question. Both he and his brother had been testing him all week, whether they were physical tasks or mental ones. So far, he'd passed all their expectations. A hunter needed to have his bases covered, as well as possess other important traits. After all, and a trainee shouldn't be different. According to their analysis, Naruto had covered them all naturally.
The scroll is outdated. The truth is that as long as the remains are destroyed, then the ghost will be exorcised.
Whether you want to grind it up or smash it is up in the air. What matters is making sure the remains is broken beyond repair, as a ghost is able to repair their remains upon contact.
But if you cannot find their remains, you can just refer to the first connection all ghosts share.
If a ghost is anchored here by unfinished business, then all you have to do is to finish that business for them and they'll be properly sent back to the afterlife where they belong. Some hunters like to do this because it's humane, but trust me, it is harder than it sounds. I hope you're ready to exorcise this demon at whatever it costs, Uzumaki-san, even if it forces you to get down on your knees and fish the remains out of a grave. Naruto, although completely against disrespecting the sanctity of someone's grave, was okay with the thought of entering someone's grave in order to save lives. Besides, he'd been in his own grave not too long ago. What could be worse than that? Thanks, the boy replied after a moment of silence. Just a quick question though, why do you keep outdated documents even though there are several mistakes in them? Oh, the man asked as the question had got him by surprise. One reason is because their existence is priceless even though they are useless.
The effort it took to forge all these tomes were the efforts by my clan.
Another reason is that all documents about the supernatural have holes in them. Every day, us hunters learn secrets about the creatures we hunt. We put our discoveries in our paperwork before sending them back to the headquarters, the conclave. Then, these discoveries get published into books that are sent to bastions of knowledge such as the ones here. They are sent to every hunter clan so that it becomes easier to hunt down these creatures that threaten to kill us every day.
So by giving me this document, you were testing me to see if I were the type that needs to get his bases covered. That's right. Lyato smiled. The secret behind a hunter's success is his preparation, not martial prowess. The skills in battle just help us stay alive a bit longer. Now, if only my older brother would get that in his. And with that, the master hunter left, leaving behind an astonished boy. He regretted, though, not telling his student that there was yet another test waiting for him, one that could determine whether or not they should keep him as a student.
Naruto sat still in his seat, thinking about all the things that lay ahead of him in his life. This was the point of no return. At this point, he figured he could just run away and leave the colt and lady behind and live a life of norm, not caring about the creatures that lurk in the night, the creatures that these hunters spent thousands of years fighting. The balance, he thought. Is it really as delicate as Lyato once said? What would happen should this balance break?
Damn it, he'd already known the answer all along. It was against his beliefs to let something go unfinished. Even worse, it was against his beliefs to ignore something as dangerous as the supernatural to let loose in the world. He wasn't a killer, no, he was a protector. Running away and ignoring the supernatural would make him a killer, for not working to slay them would mean death to their prey. And he knew, based on his experience in the pit, that these creatures preyed on the weak. The demons, those damned beasts, tortured him every day. And on top of that, forced him to torture the souls of other humans, his brethren. No longer will he stand still and let these damned creatures make him submit. He was a new person now. He had a new life. And he damn well liked the new life he'd led so far. He picked up the scroll, choosing the path of the hunter.
He then sealed the small scroll into one of his tattoos and looked around for some books on exorcism. He noticed that Lady had been quiet all this time. He then saw her rolling on the floor where his master had demonstrated the workings of the rock salt. The salt line no longer took the shape of a circle, plus for the dog had scattered it around the floor and into her silvery fur. Damn it. Before he could study, he had a mess to clean up and a dog to bathe. Hours later. He awoke from his drowsy spell, his neck a bit stiff at having to make a large tome his pillow. He shook the tiredness out of his eyes before looking at a nearby clock. It read 10 p.m. Had it really been that long? He then closed the book, Exorcism by Fire, and laid it on the pile Naruto had made when he'd done his research on the undead. He then heard a low growl, which had shaken him out of his wonderings. He looked down the rows of bookshelves and noticed that there was no one there but he and Lady, who'd woken up just as he stood up from his seat. After a moment of contemplation, he heard another growl and laughed. It had come from his stomach. The answer was obvious. He'd just woken up at evening, and he hadn't had lunch or dinner yet. His masters were probably fast asleep or outside drinking in the closest tavern. He then heard Lady moan aloud, a noise he'd come to know as her hunger.
He laughed, rubbing her bushy head. You hungry too? Well, let's head up to the kitchen, shall we? Without a second thought, the Fenrir cub forced the boy on her back again and made her way up to the kitchen. As soon as they reached it, Naruto noticed that it was indeed very dark outside. He opened one of the cupboards and poured himself a cup of water and drank it, smacking his lips at the sudden thirst quenching. He then walked towards the fridge and took out a slab of deer meat for Lady. As soon as he set it in her large bowl, he went ahead to wash his hands and enjoyed a sandwich he'd made for himself in the morning. He stood at the counter while enjoying his little snack as he looked outside the window into the garden.
Even at night, it was a sight to be seen. Fireflies danced in the night air with controlled rhythm and crickets sang their song mercilessly and happily. And then he marveled at the drama of the mountain, how it sang to him a song of pride and majesty. And he knew that beyond it stood many more mountains, and then the ocean. Lightning Country's countryside was far different from Fire Country's rolling hills of green, but he'd come to love his new home. Still, there wasn't a day where he hadn't missed his homeland and the company of his old friends. There were a lot of things he'd wanted to tell them. He wanted to show them how far he'd gotten, and he wanted to know about them as well. But they probably had forgotten about him anyways. His thoughts then raced to Team 7, the beauty of Sakura despite her many, many flaws, and how he'd grown to love his sensei despite his equally flawed personality. And then his mind centered on Sasuke, how he'd betrayed not only the team, but the village as well. Thus was the life that the blonde chose to leave behind. He didn't care about exacting revenge upon the Uchiha. No, not at all. He'd seen far too many souls in the pit, who cared far too much on vengeance to think about their own lives. Now, look where their vengeance has brought them. Naruto shook his head and looked down at Lady as she was close to finishing her deer. And then he heard that same growl from before, only it was louder. Darker. He knew it couldn't have come from Lady as she was too pure to harbor such a hateful noise. It had probably come from outside. He quickly made a silent "Shish" to Lady, who was now snarling for having been interrupted at her meal by the growl. Naruto then quickly reached beneath the sink and found a seal the size of his finger and focused his chakra into it. Instantly, a clanging of metal could be heard as every opening that led into the mansion was closed by a layer of both metal and seals. Seals for any creatures that lurk through the night, and a 2-inch steel barricade for any invading ninjas. Once all was silent, he spoke into a seal on his wrist. Kuro, Lyato, Aobi-san, Genma, if you can hear this please answer. Over. No response. He cursed darkly. What a perfect time for them to be drunk up in some tavern. With Lady following him closely, they silently made their way towards the staircase leading towards the basement to make sure it was locked off.
And it was. Naruto sighed in relief. Though it was open, there was no sign of anyone going down the winding stairs.
He then pressed on a seal on the top step and activated it, causing a steel barricade to appear out of thin air and effectively block any attempt to enter the complex. Seals on the metal served to make it more impossible to penetrate, as no living life form could pass through that barricade without experiencing an almighty wrath of fire. The secrets hidden in the complex were the most valuable things the hunters here had possessed. Luxury items like gold and silver paled in comparison to thousands of years' worth of knowledge and power. The next step was to arm himself. Now with basement and the outside closed off, he'd successfully isolated whatever intruder that somehow made its way past the seals on the front of the estate. Now, it was either waiting outside or it was in the mansion with him. And if it was, then arming himself was the least he could do to kill this thing. As he trekked towards the quiet room, he found himself wiping a sheen of sweat from his forehead. Was he nervous? No, that couldn't be. He'd been preparing for this for 2 weeks, and he couldn't hesitate now when timing was what mattered the most. The fire still roaring with life in the hearth, its flames only serving to cast malignant shadows upon the walls of his home. That's right, his home. The one his masters allowed for him to stay in for as long as he wanted. And as long as he stayed there, he'd have to protect it, for it now was his own. He lifted off a leopard rug off from the middle of the room, found a seal and charged it with his deep blue chakra. A light surged across the room and a large chest appeared atop the seal, its iron surface painted red by the light of the fire. The boy opened it quickly and with no noise, hoping that whatever the invader was, it wouldn't hear him. He searched the contents of the chest and found nothing. Usually, weapons of different varieties lay inside, just waiting to be used. But he found nothing. What the fuck? He left it there, and went upstairs to his master's rooms. He knew they wouldn't be there, but their weapons no doubt would. He then heard a growl from below and knew that the invader, which could possibly be a creature of some sort, was in the first level looking for him. Damn it.
Once he reached the top step, he skipped before taking off on a sprint, abandoning stealth for speed. He looked inside Lyoto's room for some weapons. Nothing. Then Karu's. Nothing. Aobi's. Nothing. Fuck this. He then sped towards Genma's room. He found nothing there as well. He was a fucking blacksmith for Kami's sake. This is ridiculous.
He then resorted to Plan B. Since he was in Genma's room, he activated a seal that mirrored the one found under the sink. These seals were placed around the house for easy use, so there'd definitely be a chance to defend the house or a chance to escape from it at any time. He hurried up because he noticed Lady snarling at the door. Though he didn't feel anyone's presence, he could also hear the animalistic noises getting louder and hungrier.
The seal activation was complete as the metal barricade sealing Genma's window was now gone.
Without missing a beat, he jumped through the glass with Lady following suit.
They both landed softly on the ground from 2 stories in the air and made their way to the anvil, where Genma worked on the weapons.
He noticed that the crickets were no longer singing their songs and that the fireflies were no longer dancing. He then stowed those thoughts away as he made his way to the anvil's storage room from the outside of the building. He tried to open the door, but found that it had been sealed shut with a pattern of seals he had no idea of solving at his current level. He muttered a curse before turning around and saw what exactly had been chasing him. His eyes widened into a glare when he saw a humanoid shape.
A man, in Anbu clothing, had begun to stalk towards him like a predator. The growls that he produced weren't at all human, betraying the form of his attacker. But why a ninja from Konoha? Hadn't they kept his existence here in Lightning Country a secret? And why is he by himself? Every ninja, no matter what team they belonged in, traveled in groups, even if it was just a pair. But this man, who had come to take away the blonde's life, stalked closer, as if the only thoughts that inhabited its mind were pure instinct.
But then, Naruto saw its eyes. Or rather, he didn't see them, for they didn't reflect the light a normal person's would. This person, this thing, had black eyes. The boy then no longer felt fear, for anger took its place. He no longer feared this thing, for this shell of a person was possessed by a demon.
You bastard, Naruto roared hotly, get the hell out of him.
I cannot do that. The demon licked its lips with pleasure, for you are my prey. Then, the possessed man sprinted towards the boy, as he was caught off guard by the sudden attack. The demon shell's hand extended towards Naruto's head, revealing its sharp claws. Luckily, Lady acted fast as she, once again, carried Naruto on her back. The blonde was relieved that his companion reacted so fast. He noticed that they were still moving and looked back to see that the demon was gaining on them. Quickly, too, head to the training grounds, girl. I have an idea.
The cub barked in acknowledgement and carried the boy up the league of stairs towards the hallowed training grounds and skidded to a stop once they reached it.
Instantly, the hunter in training began to focus his chakra to his core and released his weight seals. Although the weight wasn't much, it still helped him move five-fold compared to his spar with Kuro. He waited and waited until he heard the snarls and the wicked laughter coming from the demon. He readied himself, but when he looked towards Lady, he found her lying on the ground behind him unconscious. Standing on top of her was the demon, its smile further serving Naruto's rage. "You'll pay for that," he inhaled before blasting off to meet the demon in a chakra-powered punch.
"You'll have to do better than that, kid." What? The boy marveled the demon's strength. "How can this be? You were weak." The demon laughed as it sent the boy sprawling in the dirt. It stalked towards him now, a look of pleasure now in its sickeningly mad face. Then, Naruto disappeared, appearing behind the damned creature before sending a flurry of punches and kicks to its back. The demon roared in pain as it was sent directly downward into the stone floor.
Not a moment too soon, the demon found himself surrounded by clones, each with a Rasengan of their own.
The demon shell tried to escape, but he found himself tagged to the ground by two clones, each grabbing a hold of its feet. The clones snickered coldly as they descended upon the poor creature with their techniques of battle. A smoke had engulfed the area at the event, and once it cleared up, only Naruto remained. The technique had caused for the training ground to be destroyed, but that didn't matter. He knew that the seals would later cause the landmass to regenerate. He limped towards Lady when he heard a familiar voice. "How dare you turn your back on me, human?"
But before the boy could even turn around, he felt his ribs break and he was sent skidding towards the mountain wall. With one or two of his ribs cracked, he couldn't even yelp in pain. Too tired to stand, and too sore to scream, he looked up at the demon as it slowly prowled towards him, ready to finish him off.
"Stupid kid. You think you can harm a creature such as I? You dare try to strip me of my pleasure? Insolent kid, I planned to devour you quickly, but now I feel quite differently. I think I will eat you piece by piece until you can no longer feel pain. Until you've suffered so much that you've died out of pain alone." The demon was just in front of the blonde before lifting his prey up off the ground. "I shall enjoy devouring you, kid." The thing then opened its human-like mouth before it transformed into that of a shark's with rows of hideous teeth, seeking for the flesh that quenches its thirst. "You picked the wrong kid to mess with." The boy managed to breathe out the last word without revealing to the demon the pain made by merely speaking. Before the demon could question him, jaws that were larger, more terrifying than his own bit and tore into the demon shell's neck. Blood spurted out in gore, and the surprise attack forced the attacker to let go of the boy, dropping him into the stone with a hard thud. "What?" The demon roared angrily as it held on to its neck wound, futilely trying to help stop the blood flow. "You shall pay for your insolence." The demon was just about to launch its counterattack at whatever had bitten into him before turning around to see a massive creature the size of a horse. Lady, now able to stand above the attacker, roared in an almighty fury. No longer was she the playful cub, but a Fenrir in her true form. Noticing the demon still in its stupor, the Fenrir took the chance to strike, lifting up a monstrous claw before slashing it down with the speed of a master swordsman. The demon had no chance. A bit later it was lodged in between the Fenrir's frightening jaws, trying to escape, but to no avail. After a series of pain-stricken roars, the demon began to laugh madly. "You two actually think a demon can die? There is no way you can kill me, even if you destroy this body. I will simply possess this animal and devour everything you've ever loved, kid. Ah ha ha. I won't let you." The blonde stood up, mustering all the energy he didn't have. He'd originally planned to face the demon here without destroying the mansion. But now that all his attempts had failed, what was he to do? And now that he was so close to winning, the demon was just about to possess his companion. Suddenly, a thought crossed his head. He had an idea, but he had to move quickly. The demon shell then pierced the night in a terrifying shriek before a ghastly figure arose from the shell of man that it had come to possess. It was in the process of transferring into the Fenrir, but it was interrupted when the boy threw a small, ritual knife towards the demon shell's chest, effectively stopping the transfer process. Lady dropped the possessed man into the ground out of the pain caused by the demon nearly possessing her. She yelped aloud before collapsing in a heap, still in her true form. she was unconscious again. The demon stood up, writhing and gasping in pain as the offending knife burned its skin in a holy flame. What in the world was this weapon? Why hadn't he seen it coming?
He tried to pry it off, but was interrupted when the boy galloped towards him and jumped into the air before delivering a swift kick to the knife on the vessel's chest. The demon's true ghastly form escaped from its shell's body until the corpse was properly exorcised. The demon's gaseous it then dropped to the ground with a sickening crunch as the ritual knife, the legendary Colt, the blade that can kill anything, stabbed further into the vile body.
Naruto didn't think about retrieving his legendary weapon, for he had to check if his friend was alright. He limped to her and checked her vital signs. Everything was okay, thank Kami. She was still in her true form, probably because she had used up too much energy to revert back to her smaller form again. He laughed tiredly at his victory, his first demon finally slayed. I did it. I passed. His mind began to succumb to unconsciousness as he celebrated his win.
Moments after the boy began to drift away, 4 shadowy figures, shrouded in dark cloaks, entered the training grounds quietly and swiftly. They all had surrounded the boy and one of them picked him up. One of the others flashed a hand signal and the corpse of the ex-vessel disappeared in a cloud of smoke, leaving the Colt. He picked it up, marveling at its possibilities for assassination, but decided to stow it in a pouch.
One of the cloaked figures took off its hood, revealing Genma. What do you think he meant when he said, I passed?
I don't know, one of the figures said before it too took off its dark hood to reveal Naruto before walking towards his fellow hunter and smacked him on the head. But if it found out about the test, then it's all my idiot brother's fault.
Ow. The hell you did that for, bitch? Kuru snapped. Don't make me stab you with the Colt. It doesn't matter. The last figure ignored Naruto's jerk remark and revealed himself to be Aobi. What matters is that the boy passed the test. Now we can celebrate. Amen to that. Kuru said before disappearing into the night. The others followed suit. Although it was late, the nearest tavern was open, and they had plenty of reason to drink for their student had officially entered their ranks.
Elsewhere The 2 figures unfolded their wings as they prepared to take flight into the crisp, night air. They had enjoyed the battle between the demon and the boy and his Fenrir comrade, despite the fact that the demon wasn't at all real. Their spot from the top of the mansion served them as a good view of the chosen boy's improved skills. Truly, the world's fate was in good hands.
Not bad. Gabriel snorted as he began to stretch their wings before the long flight ahead. He's a little sloppy, but I'm sure he'll make a great warrior.
Indeed, Castiel smiled quite awkwardly at his blonde friend, not entirely used to the gesture. However, he still has a long road ahead before he can fulfill his destiny.
The other angel only sniffed in agreement before they descended from the roof, only to soar above the clouds a mere second later. They'd missed the feeling of flying just for fun, so the sudden rush of nostalgia had filled their thoughts with joy once again. Today was a victory for Heaven's army, for the world's savior was slowly on his way to fulfilling his destiny. They chose not to teleport back to their realm, but opted to stay and celebrate in the realm of man instead. Thunder roared with life outside the abandoned walls of the macabre mansion as 3 dark figures approached its old, ebony gates. It had been raining all night, but the weather hadn't stopped them from their goal.
A single, rusty chain connected by an equally old padlock stopped them from entering the unkempt property. Without a word, one of the figures had summoned forth a sword from its sheath and struck the aging chains, causing them to break under the force of the descending steel.
Clanging could be heard as the rusted chains snapped apart and fell in the muddy ground.
The chain's release allowed the gate to open on its own, creaking eerily as the gate spread wide invitingly.
They felt as if they were sheep heading into wolves' territory.
After a brief exchange of looks, they ventured forth. They followed an old asphalt path to the mansion's main entrance, noticing how the surrounding fields were tall and weedy due to not having been taken care of. Of course, they already knew that the property hadn't been touched for nearly 3 decades, so it was expected. As they made their way to the front entrance, they stopped to marvel at the intricate designs of the archaic door, each figure wondering how it must have looked like in its prime. One of the cloaked figures, the shortest among the 3, held its hand towards the rusted door handle to open it, but didn't get the chance to as the wind drove the doors wide open. The abrupt sound of the door almost swinging out of its hinges alerted the 3 as this was the second time that it had happened. Could this have been a sign? They exchanged looks once more. Each cloaked figure noticed that the other was nervous. Should they continue? There was a brief hesitation, but they all nodded once again before carefully walking inside. They didn't dare close the door behind them, for fear of angering the spirits of the decaying building.
Now that they were safe from the storm's angry assault, they each had pulled down their hoods, revealing their 3 young forms.
The shortest among the 3 was a girl with a pale complexion and long, dark hair, who assumed leadership and pulled out a dry branch from her rucksack.
She then took a ripped piece of cloth from one of her pockets and wrapped it around one end of the large stick.
It wasn't long before one of her friends took out some oil from his own pack and helped her create a makeshift torch with the help of a small fire jutsu they'd learned in the academy.
They traversed through the mansion, searching for a place to rest.
Their shadows danced playfully from room to room as the ebony female's flame flickered under the dryness of the deserted bastion's roof.
They ignored the cobwebs and the dust and all the creeping things that lived in and around it as their search finally ended.
Eventually, they reached a large, circular library, its dark, wooden shelves littered with tattered pages of lore.
It was a waste how such a magnificent collection was subjected to such enfeeblement, as the past owners had apparently disappeared without a trace. They set their things down in the middle of the room, far from the dusty bookshelves which had covered the walls of the aging library. Despite the empty library's overall safety from the rain, the 3 children could hear the storm growing fiercer. A constant crashing on the ceiling could be heard as the rain buffeted the roof like a drum.
One of the 2 males, a boy whose wet, red hair clung to his head due to the rain's transgressions, whispered to the girl, "Ruka, we shouldn't have come here. You know what they say about this place. All of our senpai said that it's haunted." "He's right, Ruka," the other boy, a pale blonde, had produced an oil lamp from his pack and borrowed the girl's torch to light it. "I don't know why, but I'm getting a strange vibe from this place. It doesn't feel natural, like we're not welcome. You saw what happened at the gates and at the front door, right?"
It was just a coincidence. The girl shook her head.
Tired, she looked for a place to lie down in and found herself a table and laid on top of it, using a nearby book as a pillow. She looked towards the dirty ceiling as she continued, "Besides, Sensei told us that the only way we'd get to pass the genin exam was if we were to stay here for the night. Now I don't know about you guys, but I think dealing with our parents for failing the exam for the 2nd time is scarier than dealing with a ghost that clearly doesn't exist."
Alright. The redhead gave in, trying to shake away the nerves. "If you think we can do this, then I'll stay."
"Oh, cool, look at this," the girl said in excitement as she held up the book that she'd been laying her head on. "It looks like a journal." "Let's see." The blonde approached her, the redhead a mere step behind him. "The contents of the book looks pretty boring. Wait a minute. Look here." She then pointed to a line of crimson scribbles at the bottom margin of a journal entry. "It says to go to page 300.
She looked mesmerized as she flipped through the torn pages and found the one she was looking for. It was the redhead's turn to read the red scribbles. "Turn back to the page you came from."
"What?" the girl questioned absurdly. "We just came from that page." "Just do it," said the blonde-haired boy. But as soon as she did, she was surprised to find that a new set of scribbles had replaced the ones that directed them to page 300. But still, she read aloud, "Now that you've come this far in your journey, flip towards the last page." But as soon as they did, they gulped at what they found, sweat now protruding from their foreheads. The blonde was the one brave enough to read the large, crimson writing out loud, "Thank you, Ruka, Yuri, and Dai for playing my little game. However, the game isn't finished. I look forward to meeting you soon."
The hell? Dai, the redhead shouted nervously, a grave look on his face. "Don't worry," the girl said reassuringly. "I'm sure it was Sensei who wrote that. Why else would he get us to come here? This is probably a test or something." "I highly doubt that," Dai muttered as he'd begun to pack up his things to leave. "She's right." Yuri, the blonde, placed his hand on his friend's arm, effectively stopping the boy from leaving. "Sensei must have placed the book here. It's probably a test. I think that if we pass it we can become genin. Don't you want to come home to your parents with the headband?" "I do." The boy nodded after a brief hesitation. Though the hesitation worried his friends, they couldn't ask any more of him. "Good. Now all we have to do now is fall asleep, and when we wake up tomorrow morning we'll come back to school."
The 3 academy students began to set up camp, producing from their packs their sleeping bags while using the lamp as warmth.
The soft flames were too weak to illuminate the whole room, giving them a sense of discomfort, if the dust and the creepy crawlies weren't discomforting enough. The creeping dark stared at them, and they stared right back. It was as if they were on one side of an ongoing fight between light and darkness. Though the light was keeping them safe, it felt as if the creatures of the dark were waiting for the flames to die out before they could invade their relative peace.
The 2 boys slept on the floor, while the girl, not wanting to encounter any rats or bugs, chose to sleep on the table. She still used the old journal as a pillow. She began to feel an itch at her side, so she reached for it. Then, she felt it on a different spot and reached for it yet again. After relieving herself of the itch, she heard someone whispering her name hauntingly.
What? She queried her 2 friends, knowing quite well that they also had trouble falling asleep. According to their tossing and turning, that is. It must have been them who'd called for her. What? They replied. The 2 boys didn't sit up to answer her back. Did either of you say my name? No, we didn't, Ruka. Let us sleep. The blonde muttered haplessly.
But I heard someone say my name. The girl grew chill as a shiver creeped down her spine.
This isn't funny. The redhead chided accusingly. I bet you're just saying that so we'd run away and you'd be a genin by yourself.
Fine, I'll stop. She blew her ebony, silken hair out of her face. She was probably hearing things.
It wasn't long before they'd begun to sleep, all except for Ruka, who was still affected by the deathly voice. She felt that same itch from before, so she reached to scratch it. But upon touching her skin, she felt someone's fingers meet hers. She gasped and turned around, only to meet an obscure face. She didn't get a good look, but it was definitely the face of a man. She screamed and pulled herself away fast enough to roll off the side of the table. If her shriek hadn't alerted her friends, then her landing did.
What the hell? The blonde stood up in high alert. You saw a bug or something?
He helped her back up, but her knees were too much like jelly to keep her standing. She was shaking so much that her friends had to clamp her hard enough to remain still. They noticed that she was very pale. She was too frightened to answer them, but she managed to point towards where she saw the man. What? Yuri took on a more serious tone. What are you trying to tell us? I saw someone. Who? Was it Sensei? Did you see our Sensei? He repeated, only to receive a negative in response. Are you sure you saw someone? Yes. She screeched furiously, just like how I'm sure someone said my name a few minutes ago. Wait a minute, she continued, pointing towards her other friend's sleeping bags. Where's Dai?
But before Yuri could answer, the soft flames of the lamp had snuffed out mysteriously. The light no longer was on their side. Their screams rang out throughout the night, only to be muffled by the crying weather.
Present day Despite his teacher's warnings, Naruto chose to vent off his rage silently in training as the memories of the past day filled his head. He'd known that it was a test from the very start. Several signs had pointed out to it. The first sign was that something had broken into the estate. Nothing could get past the seals, not even a cage-level ninja.
The second sign was that he'd heard absolutely no signs of wildlife in the garden when he'd broken out of Genma's window. It must have meant that in between the time when he did actually hear wildlife and the time that he didn't was most likely the time where Kuro must have cast the genjutsu on him. Damn him and damn those hunters for not at least warning him ahead of time about the final test. The last sign of it all being a test was the most obvious. The nickname that the fake demon gave him.
Hey, kid. Kuro yelled at the boy as he was currently staring at a random spot on the ground within the training area.
Kid, Naruto cursed mentally. That name was what had confirmed his theory of yesterday's events of being a test. No one called him that stupid name besides his idiotic teacher, Kuro. Naruto looked towards his smiling teacher. The man, in turn, flinched as the boy's furious glare invaded his soul. Kuro rubbed his short, brown tresses apologetically.
Still angry, kid? The man approached his student until he was a mere 3 feet away.
Sure, Naruto was scary when he was mad, but there was no way he'd let the boy affect him so easily. When Kuro didn't receive even a look as much as a reply, he continued, Look. You have my word that yesterday was the final test. Now that you passed, we can now officially call you our pupil. And besides, Lyato and I received a far worse test before we were officially inducted into hunter kind. We had to hunt an actual creature, not an illusion. But I wanted to slay a demon. The fact that it was an illusion took that away from me. Even if it wasn't real, it was still as powerful as an average demon, and the fact that you defeated it at your age makes me proud as a teacher. Besides, there's no way we'd actually set a thing like that loose in our house in our backyard. Imagine all the damage we'd have to clean up. The boy could only huff in response as his master made a good point. You could never argue with these guys. Everything in your property could repair itself about an hour after getting damaged thanks to the seals surrounding it. That includes the house as well. But you make a good point. Now, why did you have to interrupt my training? The master hunter shook his head and laughed at the kid's stubbornness, but he gestured for them to head towards the mansion. Aobi wants to see you. Something about your cult and getting you ready for your mission. You'd probably want to hear it, 'cause everything that man says is money.
Without any further words of resistance, the boy shunshined into the estate, leaving behind a lazy instructor. His thoughts grew darker as he recounted the way his disciple had a bloodthirsty look in his baby blues. Naruto made it clear that he wanted to slay a demon. Not only that, but Kuru knew that Naruto had a sort of vendetta against demons, a vengeance similar to his own once upon a time. Kuru shook his head at the path Naruto was walking in.
He knew all too well that the path of vengeance wasn't a glorious path at all. He knew exactly why Naruto wanted revenge on those damned creatures. However, his instincts told him that there was something else. There was probably another, more darker reason for his little blonde student to hate the damn things with such intensity. Damn, even he didn't hate the demons that much back when he wanted revenge of his own. Just what hell did they do to the Naruto to affect him so much? You may enter, boy, Aobi said from his table as Naruto opened the door to his room. The 14-year-old breathed in amazement as he took in the beauty of the relics of great antiquity adorning the Huntmaster's walls. Ancient weapons and skulls of some of the world's legendary creatures, as well as ancient, unreadable texts, were framed high up on the walls as if it were a trove of accomplishments. An old man's memories, Naruto entertained. There was a flight of stairs separating the old man's bedroom from his personal study at the top of the stairs. Naruto saw Aobi standing up from his chair and walking down the narrow flight of stairs to meet him. I see that you enjoy what you see, Naruto, Aobi smiled as a twinkle flashed in the boy's eyes. This was the first time that the young one had entered his study. The amazement was evident on his face. Hey, you, wanna see something cool? Aobi didn't wait for the blonde to nod his head, hastily making his way back up the stairs, leading Naruto to his grand study table. Once he and the boy made it to the large, wooden lectern, he reached into one of the drawers and pulled out a rugged, black book of which was carefully wrapped in a plastic bag. He cautiously began to open it and placed the old book into Naruto's astonished hands. Whoa, what is it? The boy asked wide-eyed. Aobi chuckled and rested his hand on the boy's shoulder the way a grandfather would do to his grandson after a long separation. Naruto carefully flipped through the delicate, oxidized pages, afraid that it will fall apart in his small hands. This here is an old journal of the man who made the cult a legend. The hunter wielded the weapon with such great skill that he became the father of modern hunters today. His name was Dean Winchester. Of course, the Colt took the form of a different weapon at the time, but its powers were as irrefutably certain as it is today. Together with that weapon, the brothers Winchester hunted many demons and monsters alike. This book is my gift to you for entering our ranks. Naruto's brows furrowed as he couldn't make heads or tails at the old scripture. What the heck? It doesn't make any sense. I know. The old man began to laugh mirthfully. This book is thousands of years old. Back then, people used a different script and a different universal language back then. I'll teach you the language one day, but there's some words that even I can't comprehend myself. It's a wonder how this book has held itself together for so long. It's almost as if it were magic, Naruto continued. He didn't notice the soft twinkle in Aobi's eyes. Naruto tried to shake away his awe, giving the old man a look that told Aobi that he wanted to focus on the task at hand. So, you called for me. I did, the aging man simply said, shoving the plastic bag into a drawer after Naruto carefully pocketed Dean's journal. I would firstly like to congratulate you for successfully passing the final test. Your teachers will be taking your training up a few notches from now on. But for now, you have a mission sent to you personally from the Conclave. I know. Lyato said that they'd be evaluating my performance in the hunt so they can train me based on how well I handle myself.
Yes, the elderly man nodded, walking towards a strongbox that seemed to have poofed on his desk in a light broom of smoke, but you cannot do so without your necessities. But before Naruto could attest his confusion, Aobi bestowed upon him even more gifts. The man handed him a large rucksack with a label that said, Hunter's Supplies, on it. He'd seen Lyato, Karu and, in some cases, Genma, packing supplies into it before their hunts. He'd also been told that these bags, which held almost everything a hunter needed to exorcise, slay or capture prey, were in fact resistant to the elements.
He spotted Lyato sparring with Kuro one day and saw Lyato engulfing the older brother with a volley of intense flames. Kuro, who'd forgetfully forgotten to discard his rucksack, instantly caught on fire. And though his clothes were no more, his rucksack was the only thing not ruined. Thankfully, he kept an extra pair of training clothes inside his pack. Thank you, sir," Naruto exclaimed, but he was hushed as the man merely smiled and signaled that he wasn't finished. Aobi pulled out a scroll and unsealed a small, red leather book. "This is what we call a grimoire."
Naruto grabbed the small tome from the man's hands and quickly skimmed through text's contents as the old man continued.
Grimoires are basically just condensed collections of information on all the known prey. They're organized in a way that you can flip to a certain species or race that you want to look up with efficiency. I've had my life saved with the knowledge these books contain several times throughout my career. There were even times where I was so desperate that I pulled one of these babies out during a battle with one of the creatures on my wall. Aobi motioned to a monstrous skull that looked humanoid, but was far larger than a human skull. "We call him the Wendigo. These creatures are rare, but they sure packed a punch. Anyways, when you're stuck or are in a pinch, don't hesitate to refer to these books when you're in trouble." "Has Lyato told you about how we update our information?" "Yes," bestowed the grimoire into his rucksack before continuing. "Lyato told me that the Conclave receives new information that hunters like you guys, us, discover. Then, the Conclave publishes these findings and sends them to major hunter cells and clans, hoping that we will have that much more of a better chance to survive." "That's right," Aobi smiled as memories of his own career raced across his mind. "The same goes for your grimoire. Every month, we'll replace it with a newer, more updated version, so don't get too attached to the one you have currently." Naruto chuckled at the thought. "Don't worry, old man, I won't. And I'll be sure to rely on my grimoire should the need arise." "Good. Oh, and one more thing. I almost forgot." Naruto was left aghast as the Aobi produced from the strongbox a hunter's cloak, ash gray in color. Now thoroughly emptied, the strongbox disappeared in a cloud of smoke. "Now that you're one of us, Naruto, you can finally wear this cloak with pride. Think of it as a badge or a ninja headband, only it is more exclusive. With it, you'll be recognized as a hunter by other hunters, and you'll be able to enter hunter-run establishments as well. And no, you can't enter the Conclave without an invitation of entry. It takes someone of a high enough ranking to freely come in and out of the Conclave." Wow, the boy was left speechless as he wrapped the beautiful ash-gray cloth around his neck, successfully concealing his entire body above his shins in mystery. "Thank you, sir. Trust me, you won't regret taking me in and making me a hunter."
"About that. About me not regretting not making you a hunter, I still have my doubts." The man's once smiling face took on a darker shade, a shadow passing over his complexion as he turned around. Naruto was frustrated as he was now facing the wise man's back. What's wrong?" "The Colt. I have it. You lost it when you defeated the demon illusion. I had Karu retrieve it for me when you were unconscious." "That's right." Naruto grew suspicious of the man's intentions with his weapon. His weapon. The weapon in which the angels trusted him with, and no one else. "Please give it back, then, if you have it. It's my burden." "I will." Aobi faced Naruto once again, the Colt now in his hand as if he somehow conjured it out of thin air. He played with it, tossing it about as if it were just any knife. "As if it were his. It is a marvelous weapon, you know." Able to kill any creature with one mortal blow. Able to do the one thing a mere human cannot, kill a demon. As you already know, it is impossible for a hunter to kill a demon. We can only exorcise them, force them out of their vessels and corner them until they return to hell. But with this almighty weapon, we can end a demon's existence absolutely. Without question. Also, it can possibly kill things that are even more powerful, more darker than demons, as impossible as that may sound.
The boy reached out for the man to place the Colt back into his small hands. And he did, only he didn't let go. They now had the small blade in a tug of war, a war Naruto knew that he wouldn't win. Naruto gave the old man a questioning look before he continued. I cannot give you back your weapon until you make a solemn oath. And what oath is that? To swear to protect the balance with your life. To promise not to kill a human unless it interferes with the hunt. And finally, to offer your life as a servant under the conclave for the rest of your career. Oh, don't look at me like that. You and I both know that the conclave looks out for humanity's best interest, despite the fact that we cannot be appreciated by the very same people we are sworn to protect. Swearing to this oath will not only allow you to officially become a hunter under our discipleship, but a servant under the most powerful, most secretive organization known to man. Naruto didn't speak. He'd been contemplating this ever since the moment he first surfaced the moist soil of his grave. He knew he had a choice. He could follow the path that the angels laid out for him, become a powerful hunter in preparation of the apocalypse. Or, he could do things his own way and walk away from these men with the Colt in hand. He could turn his back on destiny and keep the power of the legendary blade all to himself.
With it, he can return back to Konoha, become the Hokage and live a complete life.
He had the right to love, life, and happiness. He had the right to it all. He knew it and his masters knew it too. In fact, they'd willingly let him go away should he choose the path of desertion. No one asked him to stay. Besides, he was never one to believe in destiny. Why should he follow a path already set up for him when he could find happiness instead? He was in control, not the angels, not the hunters, not anybody.
Well? Aobi's eyebrows raised expectantly. Fine. I accept.
Even though he was given options, he knew that his decision affected the world's future. He had the right to be selfish and run away with the Colt to Konoha. But if he did so, then what of the humans? What of the world's fate? Without him putting his life on the line, without him sacrificing the life he was generously given back, without him putting humanity before himself, without him period, everything and everyone would be consumed in a terrible maelstrom of hellfire. He'd been through that fiery torment once before. No one deserved that, no one. He didn't believe in destiny. He didn't believe in himself. He didn't even believe that this path was the right path, but he had to take the risk for humanity's sake. He had to take the risk so that no one would ever go through a torment that they did not deserve. And with that, the old huntmaster released his grip on the Colt, returning the boy his ceremonial blade. That was it. His path was now set. All he had to do now was survive. If he really was this so-called chosen one, if he really was meant to save the world from the apocalypse, then what he needed to do now was to stiffen up his upper lip and buck up to whatever came his way. Sounds easy, right?
Good. The old man sighed in relief, sitting down into the chair that he left prior to Naruto's visit. Now, a final thing before you head to the anvil to get outfitted for the hunt.
What is it? The boy inquired as he sealed the ancient weapon into the same halo-shaped tattoo that Castiel sealed into him several weeks ago.
The fact that the Colt is a legendary weapon makes it very sought out for.
He said quietly. Naruto nodded firmly. You must make sure that the conclave must not know about its existence. For if they do, then it can spell disaster upon this home. They'll not only kill you, lady, and everyone in here, but they'll also wipe out any records that prove our existence. They'll kill anyone and every one of the people you befriended in your past life. They won't even hesitate to wipe a whole village clean across the map as long as their existence isn't compromised, even if that village is Konoha. We'll all just be dust in the wind. And all that for just a mere weapon. I see, Naruto muttered darkly. So this is why Castiel told me to never let it go free from my hands. Even though it's so powerful, literally anyone can wield it, which is what makes it so dangerous. Its influence runs much deeper than that of a mere weapon.
That's right. because it can kill just about any abnormal out there. Its worth has long been fought for.
Us humans have waged wars over this weapon for thousands of years. It doesn't matter if it has no special powers against mankind, just as long as it has powers, period. They'll do whatever it takes even to get a small glimpse of it. Promise me one thing, boy. Promise me that even though you're not allowed to harm a human being due to our laws, do not hesitate to kill anyone that finds out that you are its chosen holder. Don't hesitate, or else everything you've worked hard for will fall down the drain.
I promise, Aobi-san. No one will know about its existence, and if they do, then they'll be dealt with. Good. Aobi's smile returned as the boy had finally known the true burden that the colt came with. Now get out of my office. I was reading before you so rudely interrupted me.
Naruto laughed as he climbed down the stairs and made his way to Genma to prepare for his mission. Though he was happy at finally getting his weapon back, he was ashamed at suspecting some sort of betrayal from the elder hunter. He knew better than that. But he was glad. He now knew where he stood, and he was now sure of what path to follow. Aobi raggedly sighed beneath his breath. If his suspicions were right, then this boy would live a very long, very hard life. A hunter's life was not one of glory or valor. His own life had been one without mercy. It had been one of bloodshed, and it had definitely been one of heartache.
There was no doubt that Naruto would experience the same, if not worse.
All in all, he was both happy and sad that Naruto chose the right path. He was happy because Naruto had the potential to fix the balance and bring about a golden age of peace, but he was sad because Naruto was still a boy. A boy. Now, he could never live a normal life, as did Aobi or anyone cursed with the life of a hunter. Sure, Aobi had lived a life of satisfaction, and maybe even contentment, but not happiness. Never happiness. Naruto knocked on the iron, platinum-bolted back door of the anvil. His soft rapping reverberated lowly with sounds able to stir the whole village.
It was still early in the morning, and business hours hadn't started yet, so he figured the only person inside was Genma. A loud "come in" was heard from the working man, so the boy let himself in.
He cringed just as he had opened the door. Steam and heat emanated from the forge and the furnace, making Naruto's eyes water. How could anyone stand this heat, much less work in it? The rise in temperature forced the boy to shift in his place before going in to meet the man who was busy pounding away at a piece of layered steel. The man brown trousers, but he wore no shirt. Sensing Naruto's presence, Genma turned around and flashed Naruto a kind toothpick-totting smile.
I see you've spoken to Aobi already, he said as he settled a glowing hot katana into a tub of water.
The cool-down process sent plumes of steam Naruto's way, forcing the man to laugh in amusement despite Naruto's impatience. He wore an old bandana on his head, which served to both hide his shoulder-length, straight brown hair and keep his sweat from interfering with his job. By now, the water was probably close to boiling, but it was fine as long as it cooled down the tempered blade. He was proud of his work, able to turn a 4-day job of hammering mere hunks of steel into that of a masterpiece in the span of just a day. It wasn't just the speed in which he'd created custom blades that made his humble little shop popular among the Ashigari populace. It was the secret recipe in which was handed down his line that gave the blades great quality. The recipe consisted of a perfect balance between the malleable hardiness of low-carbon steel and the sharp, yet brittleness of high-carbon steel. Balance, to both hunters and his family, was key. Naruto didn't answer. He merely waited for the man to outfit him for the hunt ahead. As soon as the sword stopped glowing, Genma placed it in a cloth and laid it back on the forge. He'd finish it off later on. Okay, Naruto, hand me your rucksack. The blonde didn't hesitate to follow the older man's directions. He observed Genma, as the man walked towards a storage closet and placed rock salt and several scrolls inside the many pockets of Naruto's large pack. Most of these scrolls hold supplies for exorcism, both for demonic and ethereal creatures alike. Obviously, the scroll that says, Med, contains various herbs and drugs for medical purposes. The scroll with the large F is for your food. Of course, we really mean rations. They're empty right now, but today's mission is in Kumogica, so you'll be able to stock up in the marketplace once you get there. The scrolls that are unmarked are for sealing purposes, so you can do whatever you want with those. Thanks. Naruto nodded as his fellow hunter continued to stow away more and more tools inside his backpack. He wondered how such a bag, despite its relatively large size, could hold so much without bloating up like a balloon. Perhaps there was an enchantment placed on it.
As soon as he finished stocking the boy's rucksack, he zipped it closed and gave it a good tap. He faced the young hunter with an assuring grin. "I'm proud that you've come so far, Naruto. Believe me, I've seen you from the start, seen you grow up. I'm truly glad that you chose to follow in his footsteps." The perplexity clearly showed on the boy's tanned complexion. "What do you mean? Have we met before in my past life? And what do you mean in following in his footsteps?"
"Oh, you don't remember me. I assumed you did. I was the acting proctor in your Chunin exam. I replaced the Hayate guy who kept coughing during the preliminaries, remember? And don't worry about the other remark. I was just taken back at the nostalgia, is all."
"Oh yeah." Naruto suddenly perked up. "Whatever happened to the sick guy?"
"He died," the older man grunted as he shook his head in bitter contemplation. "But that's not important. What is important, however, is getting you ready for the hunt. As you've probably noticed, I didn't make you any chakra-infusible weapons as of yet. I'll only make you some once you've successfully mastered your elements. And don't worry about how I know about your training. Kuro's a loud mouth, after all."
Naruto scoffed at that. No matter how much a douche his master was, he was still a loudmouth through and through. That sounds like him all right.
Genma nodded as he closed in on a large weapons rack that hung on the wall. "Anyways, just because I didn't make you any chakra-infusible weapons doesn't mean you will be fighting unarmed. Here, I prepared these for you."
Naruto's mouth watered as Genma motioned for every weapon that hung on the weapons rack.
Every weapon. Naruto spotted several blades as well as some very exotic weapons such as a scythe and a couple kamas.
"Oh, he'd definitely have fun with those." Genma merely continued as the boy didn't seem to shake out of his dream-like stupor. "As you may know, Kuru and Lido have weapons that are blessed with the powers of exorcism. And though we don't yet have the resources yet to make you one of your own, it'll be your responsibility to get acquainted with these weapons. Of course, our meaning of acquaintance actually means that we want you to use them at the level of mastery." What? You want me to master all of those? Of course we do."
Genma didn't hesitate to chuckle evilly at the boy's disdain. Making a blessed weapon is hard work. It requires the metals of dozens of metal crucifixes, each of them blessed by a priest of a certain deity. Then, we cool down the weapon with holy water, as well as sealing the metal with several ingredients, all of which help boost the weapon's overall powers of exorcism. These weapons are extremely expensive and are time-consuming to make, so we need to see which weapon you're best at before we invest in making you one. "I see. But why would I need blessed weaponry if I already have the Colt? I bet the Colt is much better in terms of power, and it's really great in terms of indoor and close-quarters combat due to its small size."
"That's very true, but I'll show you what I'm talking about rather than explaining it. Hand me the Colt for a minute. You can trust me."
Naruto, after a brief hesitation, unsealed the Colt and handed it to Genma. The man stood there, focusing on the small, ceremonial blade. Naruto felt a rush of chakra, and saw that the chakra that permeated from the man's chakra was a vibrant green. Is that wind chakra? Yes. The problem is that it's damn near impossible to channel chakra into the Colt. It wasn't made for man to fight other men. It was made for man to fight everything else. I can only guess that it was made for man's survival.
My weapons are all blessed weaponry, as you can see.
Genma motioned for a chest inside his desk and opened it, revealing a plethora of black-dyed metal weaponry. Although they didn't look any different from normal weapons, Naruto knew that they were designed for two things: concealment and efficiency. I can easily channel my wind chakra through them unlike your Colt, and they can exorcise any creature that can be exorcised. So basically, they're also more versatile than your Colt. I can rely on my skill to kill my foes and not some ancient hunter magic. I see, but that still doesn't change the fact that the Colt is the ultimate hunter weapon. Why should I master every single weapon in the world if the only weapon I need mastery in is the Colt?
Genma sighed in exasperation, rubbing the bridge of his nose in contemplation of how to properly word his thoughts.
Clearly, the boy didn't want to spend time on other weapons when he could just focus on the fabled weapon called the Colt.
That's also very true, Naruto. The problem is that using the Colt should be your last line of defense, especially if you're working with people who don't know about us hunters, or else they'll try to steal it.
It's even worse if you use it in front of people who are hunters, because they'll recognize that you have the Colt and would either report directly to the conclave or kill you and take it for themselves. And believe me, dispatching a disciple like you is easier than a walk in the park. No offense.
None taken. Naruto rolled his eyes. Good. So basically, your use of the Colt should be as limited as possible. It should be the last thing you use should the need arise. Your life is very important, Naruto, but you need to acknowledge that losing the Colt would be just the same as bringing upon the apocalypse.
Besides, if you rely on one thing for too long, then you'll be too dependent. I've been a hunter for a short time, and I've noticed that hunters are no one-trick ponies. We have to be versatile and adaptable as well as being prepared. I remember my first hunt. I relied solely on my ninja skills and I almost died. It could have been avoided, but my inexperience in sealing creatures almost cost me my life.
Alright, Naruto understood. I'll give these weapons a try then.
Genma nodded happily as Naruto collected the weapons that he was given and sealed them within a few scrolls as well as his body. He'd be damned if the chosen one relied too much on a single weapon, as powerful and as legendary as that weapon may be. He knew a clan once that relied too much on one aspect of their fighting capabilities. Both their egos and their dependence nearly wiped them all. That clan was the Uchiha. He shuddered at the thought of Naruto doing the same with the Colt.
So, is there any advice you can give me before I meet my masters for my mission?
All I can say is to take care of yourself and not to forget the lessons you've been taught so far. Your teachers will be aiding you, so my advice isn't very needed. By the way, I'll be seeing you around since I've heard that you're a wind element like I am.
Naruto grinned before expressing goodbye. Genma scoffed at how ironic this whole situation was. Naruto, the son of a legendary hunter, was given a weapon able to surpass even his father and possibly even the legendary brothers Winchester themselves. He figured it wouldn't take long for the boy to get accustomed to the weapons he dumped on him. He expected great things from the boy. Naruto exited the room and chose to head out through the store and not the back, seeing as how his two teachers were probably waiting for him at the front of the estate. They may be taskmasters, but they were punctual taskmasters. Hard asses, Naruto mused. He passed by handmade racks and shelves, rows of weapons born of the forge and of Genma's skilled hands.
He hadn't yet seen the enigmatic man in combat, but if his combative skills were comparable to his metallurgy and his wisdom, then he was probably fierce in combat as well.
Genma's masterpieces were nothing short of the word. Naruto didn't doubt that a single touch on any of the blades the hunter made could easily saw through bone.
Naruto sighed in disbelief. Were they so confident in him that they believed that he could master such deadly weapons at such a fast pace? Though the Genma didn't specify what time he expected to attain the resources necessary to make a blessed weapon, Naruto expected it would take no longer than a few months. And a few measly months was pushing it, too. But Naruto didn't doubt his master's training. He doubted only himself. The blonde stopped mid-step as reached the door of the successful establishment.
His hand came close to the door, but he didn't touch it, for something had just dawned on him. It wasn't that they had confidence in him, not at all. They all knew that he was to either sink or swim. If he didn't master a single weapon by the time Genma receives the materials, then he'd end up dying on a mission due to ill preparedness. It almost happened to Genma, so why couldn't it happen to him as well? And it wasn't even that long ago that the man had his first hunt either, so Naruto's chances were looking quite slim. Had his teachers spoken too soon when they told him he was ready for his first hunt? Naruto breathed in deeply, trying to maintain his composure. Nerves, he'd been told, were a hunter's worst enemy. If he were to hesitate, then his performance would suffer. And should his performance suffer, then so would he.
He opened the door and saw that it was still dark out. The sounds of wildlife pervaded his thoughts and sparked the embers of nervousness in his belly, bringing it to life as it manifested into bright hot flames of excitement. Within the next 2 hours, he and his masters would travel to the main village and search around for the ghost, wherever the hell it may be. This was his first hunt. There was no room for error. Naruto sighed once again, for what seemed to be the 100th time today. It wasn't out of nervousness or disbelief. It was out of complete and utter boredom. After their long trek to the great village of Kumogica, the village hidden in the mountains, the first thing they did was establishing a base of operations. They'd done that about a few hours ago, when it was close to noon. It didn't take long for them to unpack. And now, they each had gone their own way, gathering as much information as possible in regards to their prey. The spectral. "Can I get you anything, kid?" a waiter awkwardly asked Naruto, who was making himself comfy on a restaurant's patio. The waiter tried to get a look of Naruto's face, but his cloak served to protect his identity. Naruto removed his curious eyes from the village's beautiful scenery as he turned to the waiter to reply. "A bowl of ramen, please. Miso, if you have any." "Oh, sorry, ramen isn't on the menu." "What?" Naruto glared hot, steaming daggers at the older boy, who was close to fainting at the sudden rise of killer intent. This couldn't be happening, Naruto thought. His hopes were crushed when he first found out that the hunters didn't like to make ramen up in the Ninomiya mansion.
And despite his attempts to scour the neighboring village for even an ounce of ramen broth, his heart was shattered even further when he found that there was not a single noodle stand in the Ashigari township. He scoured the surrounding villages as well, as if he were a lab rat traversing a maze for its food. Apparently, ramen wasn't a staple food here in Lightning Country. These people were crazy. And now, this idiot of a waiter was refusing him one of the few things in life that actually mattered. How dare he? "What did you say? I think I might have misheard you." We don't have ramen on the menu, sir." Another spike of chakra served to force the poor boy to back away. "But, we do have the ingredients to make it. A custom order, then. Will there be anything else?"
"No," Naruto puffed as he crossed his arms in annoyance. Really though, he couldn't understand the gall that these people had. Was ramen not considered a delicacy here? "That'll be fine." The waiter merely bowed in apology and thanked the blonde for sparing his life before rushing off into the kitchen, barking grim orders at the chefs as if their lives literally depended on it. Naruto turned back to amazing view of the village, thankful that it was too early in the morning for most people to come out and about. He enjoyed the relative and lonely calm out in the streets. After spending hours on gathering intel with no luck, a brief rest was welcomed warmly. Kumogica was truly a sight to behold, as it quite literally was the village hidden in the clouds.
The village was misty in the morning due to the altitude of the mountain that it laid its foundations on. It wasn't misty right now that it was just about noon, but he was still surprised that he hadn't fallen to his doom yet. Climbing the mountains to reach Kumo was quite an arduous task. And upon entering the village, he was forced to push his body even further due to the layout of the shinobi metropolis.
Kumo had more bridges than streets. The bridges connected one mountain to another.
It wasn't a single mountain that the village was founded on, but it was in fact an entire range of mountains, much to Naruto's displeasure.
The bridges were woven between each mountain intricately and practically. A vast web of trained killers. But all the practicality in the world didn't stop the soreness from reaching his feet, as it took them quite a while to find a place to claim as their base of operations. And what better to have one than in the sketchiest, dirtiest inn in the entire village. Despite the magnificence and architectural beauty of the village's titanic, blue-gray buildings, Kumo actually had prejudices of its own. Not only were the citizens separated by what mountains they'd lived in, but the altitude in which people lived in also served to separate them in class as well. The more nobler a clan was, the higher their homes or family compounds would be. No doubt the altitude served to protect the noble families from their attackers, from terrorists and petty criminals stupid enough to trespass their property. It wasn't much a surprise to Naruto that the nasty inn that they used was in fact one of the buildings in the lowest point of the village. What Kumo reminded Naruto of Konoha was that ninjas lived on one side of the village, while regular townsfolk lived on the other. There were certain mountain ranges that regular villagers couldn't enter, and the same went for ninjas unless it interfered with their jobs. It was a pity how something as stupid as class prejudice reached a village as great as Kumogica. Men, the people Naruto was now training to protect, were stupid. Within the center of the two sides of the village stood the monolith structure of the Raikage Tower. It towered over all the buildings combined, as if watching over the village like a mother hen would over her squabbling chicks. It was quite obvious that the Raikage's tower stood on the peak of the highest mountain. The Raikage, after all, was the noblest, greatest ninja of the village. For ninjas living in Kumo, the status of Raikage was literally a race for the top. Naruto actually had to look up to take a gander at the tower.
He wondered if the native citizens were exceedingly more athletic than those who lived in low-altitude villages like Konoha. Living constantly in high altitude did that to people.
He and Kuro regularly spent as much time as possible in their training grounds, hoping that acclimatizing to the high altitude would do wonders to their athleticism. And it did. Naruto was quite proud at how well his taijutsu was coming along. He could now do things similar to a certain young, bushy-browed ninja back in the Chunin exam. Though Naruto knew the risks of overconfidence, he couldn't help but compare himself to Ali. After all, besides Kuro, he didn't know that much taijutsu masters out there. On top of having great athleticism, the people of Kumo were also known to have specialized in both lightning jutsu and swordplay.
Naruto's sword hand was quite decent, if he couldn't say so himself, but these people were revered in that respect.
Lyato had informed him that it wasn't uncommon to find quite a few sword masters out in every mountain. Naruto also suspected that they were a hardy and adaptable people, seeing how the village's conformance with the beautifully cruel mountains served to symbolize their ability to overcome even the most impossible obstacles. These people were probably one of the strongest military forces in the entire elemental nations. This knowledge served to paint Naruto a picture of who these people were. It taught him what to expect out of them, allowing some ease in terms of information gathering. It wasn't long before the waiter returned with Naruto's bowl of ramen. The blonde's mouth watered the moment the waiter stepped outside. The playful, morning breeze helped to facilitate the scent, but didn't help Naruto settle down at all. The waiter approached Naruto hesitantly and placed the succulent bowl of miso-flavored goodness on the table without incident. "Your order, sir." Naruto mentally pummeled himself. His job was to go undercover, not stand out. Scaring the townsfolk was an easy way of doing that. "Listen, man, I apologize for giving you a hard time earlier. It's just that being a traveling food critique, as young as I am, is quite hard. I assure you that despite your rather hideous display of service earlier, I'm willing to start out on a new slate, and I assure you that it'll start with this masterful soup right here." Thank you." The waiter deeply bowed in appreciation and dashed back inside as soon as he felt he'd lost the boy's attention.
Naruto could only shake his head as the waiter went on to tell the chef of his fake credentials. Before entering the village, Lyato made it a point to come up with a cover. Naruto didn't see a reason not to make a cover based on his love for food. He quickly changed his initial perception of a hunter. His masters told him that it would be tough, but so far, a hunter's life was sweet. Without much further thought, Naruto returned his gaze on to the highest peak of the mountain range, which conveniently was where the Raikage's tower conformed to. Naruto's eyes couldn't leave it as the sun kissed the peak with its enveloping love, leaving behind a sight to behold. Naruto sat there, soup in hand, admiring the beauty of the view. This was the life. Naruto sat there for what seemed like hours until something, or rather, someone, caught his eyes. "A bit early for drinking, don't you think?" Lyato approached his sober brother. He was sober now, but if he didn't watch out, he'd be drunk when it mattered, and Lyato wouldn't have that. Lyato sat on a crummy old bar stool beside his older brother. When his Kuru chose to inhale a bottle of some indistinct form of alcohol instead of answering back, Lyato continued, "Shouldn't you be doing your job and collect information?" "It's too early to be snooping around. I'll wait until these cavemen start coming out of their caves. Then I will start grabbing some intel. Besides, it's not like Naruto's doing it either. He's probably killing time, too." The burly hunter grunted as he stared into the obscure bottle of liquor before pouring himself another cold glass. "Hey. You make these people sound like idiots. Like animals." "They might as well be if all we're ever gonna do in life is protect and take care of their ignorant asses. They're even worse than cavemen. Cavemen can think for themselves. These people can't. They're like babies. Stupid little babies who need our protection." Lyato frowned when his older brother downed yet another glass. "It's our job. Why don't you take a page out of Uzumaki-san's book? He seems to relish the fact that he'd be quietly serving the human race for the rest of his career." "Don't give me that. I love my job. It's just that things would be so much more easier for us if people knew about the abnormals, or at the very least, knew how to defend against them." "Me too." Lyato sighed wearily as if he were an older man. The difficulties of their career affected them in more ways than one. They just stayed there, silent as Kuru continued to consume the vile liquid. Lyato wondered how his brother came to be so bitter.
Despite the fact that they were brothers, they were separated at childhood and each had spent most of their lives away from each other. Now, they were relatively older, joined together on Kuro's whim. It wasn't until their reunion that Lyato had realized that they both had changed. Brothers becoming strangers due to what they were, what they still are. Lyato's frown deepened as he wondered why his brother was here, sitting and drinking away his woes. Was he waiting for someone? Something? Or was he here just to vent out the gruesome effects of their job?
You know, Lyato murmured, after what seemed like a lifetime of stillness, downing a cold one won't make you forget her.
After some silence, and a bittersweet pain from gulping down his sake, Kuro admitted, I stopped trying to forget her a long time ago. I don't know if it's her ghost or her memory that's haunting me, but she won't let me forget her. So, I figured, what the hell, I might as well drink in honor of her.
The taller Nanomiya brother scoffed at his brother's reasoning. What a Kuru thing to do. I know. But what I meant to say was that you needed something harder than that little drink to forget about her. Much harder. Barkeep, give me a bottle of your strongest drink.
A stout man with a hard look came by and placed a white bottle in their midst obligingly. Kuro nodded to his younger brother. Thanks, but you don't need to do this for me.
I'm not doing this for you, jerk. You're not the only one whose heart got ripped out because of some girl. Not everything is about you, you know.
Kuro opened the new bottle of hard liquor with ease and poured himself an unhealthy serving before having to wipe away a tear at its strong scent. He heard the pain in his brother's voice, despite the humored tone of its finish. He chose not to pry, but raised up his glass instead. I'll drink to that, bitch.
Lyato merely snorted in laughter, even as all the hurt, all the pain, had slowly crept into his mind. Into both their minds. Naruto's couldn't help but stare at the woman that had practically glided past the restaurant with the grace of a jungle cat. He couldn't believe how drawn he was to her mere presence. She was most likely a kunoichi, judging by the quietness and smoothness of her stride. Her blonde ponytail swiveled side to side as did her hips, but the civilians couldn't see her due to her skill in hiding in plain sight. Her gait was accented by her tight-fitting shinobi trousers and her gray Junin vest, of which she wore no clothes underneath. It wasn't just Naruto's shinobi instincts that had allowed him to catalog all this information in his mind. There was just something about her that welcomed him to her at a deep, primal level.
He wanted to know about her, comfort her, release her, for she looked so alone.
She walked through the crowding streets with practiced ease, her presence only known to him and shinobi nearby.
He wondered if it was right for such beauty to exist. She was the type of women men would wage wars for. It was then that Naruto found that he'd accidentally spilled some broth on his ashen cloak. He quickly wiped himself off with a complimentary cloth in frustration as he was distracted from the beauty of both the village and its kunoichis. He looked back to where his eyes left her, but she was nowhere to be seen. Who was she, he wondered, and why was he so drawn to her? He didn't quite know the answers, but he wanted to find out. He left his seat and headed in the direction of the lovely vixen of Cloud. Naruto ignored the demands to pay for his bill by a chef, only to be shushed by the waiter, who explained to the chef that Naruto was a traveling food critique. Both men shouted in glee for an opportunity that wouldn't happen.
After crossing the crowding street, Naruto approached an alleyway near the place where he'd last seen the mysterious woman. It was hidden in the shadows created by the towering buildings. It wasn't until he was fully enveloped in darkness of the alley that Naruto heard voices. Threatening voices. A commotion was clearly happening. Naruto's pace quickened as he reached a dumpster and settled there to hide. He made sure to completely cloak his presence as well as his chakra.
He spotted a group of men, who'd all adorned Chunin vests. They each had a hand on their holstered weapons, no doubt itching to use them. And in the middle of the group stood the woman, who eyed each and every one of the offenders with a prideful, but wary glance. Naruto wondered how these Chunin had the gall to threaten someone of higher rank, and in the same village too. He wanted to act, but he chose to observe for now. He had no reason to interfere with the pettiness of man.
I'm not gonna repeat myself, demon whore, one of the men spat, take off your vest and show us the goods. I bet you were just waiting to get fucked with the slutty way you dress.
The other men surrounding her merely laughed in turn, waiting for a peep show to happen.
The woman allowed a smile to grace her luscious lips. Why would I do that? You're all just chunin. I only entertain real men. Men like Darui and B. You all are just small fry, nothing worth mentioning. Despite her unladylike musings, Naruto couldn't help but shiver at the sultriness of her voice. The other men didn't have the same reaction. They'd each had drawn out their weapons at the attack to their ranks. Some had even begun collecting their chakra.
Not now, Naruto thought. Turn away. She can handle herself. This is not your fight.
You'll pay for that, you wretch. A different man snarled. You'll regret ever insulting us. It's not a smart idea playing with the big kids. The woman clenched her fist and unfurled it to reveal jagged claws.
She closed her defiant brown eyes and let out a low growl. Naruto felt her bloodlust in the air. She opened her eyes, her pupils now dilated as if she were an animal, a demon. A tailed demon. No wonder Naruto had been drawn to her before. She was what he used to be, a cursed human. Once again his instincts had proved him useful. If you meatheads don't stand down, I'll be forced to kill you. Please don't stand down, she continued under her breath as she unwound her long blonde hair from its ponytail. Her voluptuous hair unwound with a bounce, billowing like a flag at the terrifying force of the chakra she let out.
The men didn't care about having a good time anymore, for they each had begun their assault. A man to her left launched a lightning jutsu from his hands, letting it crash towards her. She merely lifted a hand at the jutsu and absorbed the energy with her kunai and redirected it back at him. He was launched in the air in seconds. She followed through with her counter by leaping into the air and kicking him into the ground, creating a crater in the middle of the alley. Another man sliced at her with his flame-imbued sword. She dodged a wave of flame that had been exhumed from the fiery blade, and then the blade itself.
She whipped a kunai at the man's chest. The impact wasn't much, and the penetration wasn't even that deep due to his armor. He was just about to laugh when he found that an explosive tag was attached to it. He panicked, but a second later, an explosion of light had expelled from the note instead of fire and smoke, blinding everyone in the vicinity. Sounds of metal clashing as well as soft thuds could then be heard. Once Naruto's vision returned, he found that 3 more men had dropped to the ground unconscious, including the man with the kunai in his chest. Another man exhaled and a geyser of water escaped from his mouth.
A smaller man beside him infused the water with lightning chakra. The collaboration jutsu was launched at the blonde woman at such a high velocity that Naruto didn't believe the woman could dodge it.
But she did. The cloud vixen bounded herself into a wall, then jumped into another wall as she kept dodging the jutsu that the 2 men kept readjusting to meet her graceful form. Eventually, she came close enough and unsheathed a small blade, a wakizashi no doubt, and sliced both men. Within seconds, the 2 screamed and fell on top of each other. Their jutsu was no more. Their pain-filled screams were not.
There were at least a half-dozen men left standing. They all hesitated to attack, for there was now a layer of vile blue chakra that had engulfed the blonde's deadly form.
She eyed each of the men coldly, as if she were looking straight into their souls to predict their next moves. For some reason, Naruto still found her attractive. He unsealed his wave tattoos and pulled his hood over his face in case he needed to save someone's life. At this point, he didn't quite know who to help out, the woman or the men. He wasn't to interfere with them, but he guessed that it was all right as long as he wasn't identified.
I'll give you one more chance, the woman grinned confidently. Stand down, or I'll kill you all out of defense. You already know that the Raikage loves me like a daughter. No matter what you do at this point, you'll die by my hand or his if you don't stand down.
Some of the men hesitated further, but one of them stepped forward. No way. Don't stand down. We'll be revered as heroes once this bitch is dead. We'll have most of the shinobi populace overthrow the Raikage and we'll kill him and his stupid little brother, too.
The woman growled with unrestrained animosity. Don't you dare threaten B behind his back.
Within an instant, her blue chakra cloak became more pronounced. It took the form of a feral feline. It was evident that she'd been holding back before, and Naruto knew that she was still holding back. However, there was no sign that promised that she would go easy on them.
The men didn't relent in their attack either. All 6 of them surrounded the blonde woman once again, only this time each had formed a hexagon formation around her.
With the Jinchuriki's chakra growing more and more deadlier, each man had slammed their palms into the ground. An intricate set of seals had begun to surround the ground the enraged woman stood on.
Naruto knew what this seal was. It was the seal of restriction. She wailed in pain as her chakra cloak had begun to deter, her power draining with each coming second. She sent waves of chakra their way, each one more powerful than the last. It grew close to knocking the men away, but they held on to their positions as if their lives depended on it. Naruto felt the waves of chakra as well. He came close to being blown away once, but he held on.
He too felt each wave getting stronger and stronger, but each wave felt more strained than the last. At this rate, she'd lose all her chakra and she'd die. Naruto chose this time to act. He inhaled and coiled his body tightly like a snake ready to strike. He disappeared as soon as he exhaled. A moment later, Naruto pinned a man to a wall high up on a building with a kunai. The man was instantly knocked out at the sheer force of the shunshin. Although someone had broken the formation due to Naruto's attack, the jutsu kept taking away the blonde woman's chakra. The last 5 men looked around for the attacker, each one worrying if the Raikage, or some other high-ranking shinobi had decided to step in. They were wrong. This attacker was far worse. Within another second, Naruto unsealed a single kama. The miniature scythe was hidden as well due to the shadow of the alley. He closed in on another chunin and slammed his body into a wall with a forward straight kick.
Naruto sliced his arms and his legs, effectively cutting the man's tendons. The only thing that kept him standing was Naruto's firm grip.
Without a moment too soon, Naruto stabbed the spike of one of his kama on the wall next to the man's neck and positioned it in a way that if he moved, his neck would be sliced. The man cried pathetically as Naruto, still shrouded in his cloak, left him. The man focused his strength in his legs as he came close to falling due to his sliced tendons. The man managed to escape using a wind jutsu to blow away the kama. However, he couldn't get up due to the pain. His shouts were ignored as the cloaked figure moved to dispatch his comrades one by one. When everything was over, Naruto found that all the men were either unconscious or too injured to get up. Now that all the sealers were dispatched, the seal of restriction was gone as well. He looked back at the place where the mysterious woman was confined in, but found that she wasn't there. A second later, he was pinned to the wall by her firm, outstretched hand. She smelled of flowers and rain. She growled deeply, but Naruto wasn't intimidated. He was too entranced to be intimidated. He was pinned to the shadows, so she couldn't get a good look of his face. The cloak covering his form hadn't helped either. "Who are you?" She gave him a deadly look. Naruto also noticed that her chakra cloak was no longer present. That still didn't detract from the fact that she could kill him at any second.
"Your savior. I could have handled it myself. I won't repeat myself, so answer my question," she yelled, disrupting the groans of the men that were barely left conscious by Naruto's attack. Her supposed savior's voice was a low baritone, but he sounded young, sounded inexperienced despite dispatching half a dozen chunin within a span of a few seconds. "You couldn't have escaped the seal. It was the seal of restriction. It was either I help you or let them kill you and they'd follow through on their plan to kill the Raikage. What option would you have picked?" "I'd have picked the option that didn't get me killed by the angry bitch." She let herself smile a bit before continuing her interrogation.
"But you're not going to kill me." Naruto read her like an open book. Out of the two, he was the better interrogator, and he didn't even ask her a single question. She was strong, but her body language were as unkempt as her emotions. "You would have killed me by now if you wanted to."
"That's right," she admitted. She let go of her grip on Naruto's neck and the boy merely stood there in the shadows, looking at her. "Well, at least let me look at my savior's face."
Naruto stepped out of the shadows and revealed his cloaked form. She wasn't surprised when she saw that he was short. No one her size could have stayed in the shadows for so long. Naruto took off his cloak and revealed his face.
"What the hell?" she said to herself in surprise. She knew he was young, but not that young. "You're as young as a genin. Who the hell are you?"
"That information is confidential, even to a junin of your status. Now, to answer your question. The reason why I saved you is to ask you a few questions. Follow me, please."
"What?" She scoffed in amusement. She then pinched Naruto's cheek, to his chagrin. He was finding this woman less and less attractive. "A kid your age can't possibly keep information so secretive he can't give me his name." What I said was the truth. Naruto felt undignified at her insult. He then reminded herself that his job didn't allow him dignity. He sighed. I just need to ask you a few questions. That was the reason why I saved you. Liar. She ruffled his blonde hair to his great displeasure. Just face it. You think I'm hot, don't you? How did you know? I sensed you staring at me as I was walking down the street. I'm impressed. Stealth is my specialty, and not many people can spot me, even if I'm out in the open. Does being impressed warrant your cooperation? Naruto smirked at her coolly before leading her back to the restaurant.
No, but a few bowls of ramen might. She smiled before she cooed at the young boy, my hero.
Naruto led the way while she simply redid her ponytail, both ignoring the Chunin as they screamed for someone to help them.
It wasn't long until they seated themselves at the restaurant patio. Naruto left earlier and ate bowls upon bowls of ramen. Naruto became more frustrated with each question that she shot down. She kept giving him vague answers as she happily went through bowls of liquid gold. He suspected that she was merely mooching off his money.
Another round of bowls, Mr. Critic sir. The same waiter from before bowed in respect. Yes, Naruto paid him no heed and merely waved him off. So, you're a food critic now, my cute savior, she said between spoonfuls of soup. Long story. Naruto rubbed the bridge of his nose before continuing his questions. If he didn't promise himself not to properly interrogate anyone anymore, he would have had her singing like a bird by now. Let's start this again. What is your name? She slurped in response. What is your name? Stay cool, he reminded himself. I won't tell you until you tell me yours, Savior-kun. Despite her behavior, her sultry voice still sent chills down his spine. Fine, my name is Naruto, now tell me yours. He couldn't believe himself. He made a promise to Aobi that he wouldn't reveal his identity, but this damn woman wouldn't let answer him otherwise. The name is Ni Yugito. See, isn't that better? It takes two to tango, you know. She made a childish sound when the waiter came back once again with their bowls. I don't dance, Naruto said. You don't have to be mean, Naruto-kun, she pouted. It's called doing my job. No, it's called mutual respect. I won't answer your questions if you won't answer mine.
Fine, Naruto gave. She loved ate ramen the way he did in his old life. She was just as stubborn as he was too. He even had half a mind to call in his masters to get them to interrogate her. Yes, he promised himself he wouldn't do it again, but he didn't mind it if other people did the interrogating for him. A lifestyle choice, if you will.
Good. Now, to start, why do you want me to answer your questions? It's my job. He stopped when she gave him a hard look. He sighed once again. A relative of mine went missing a few weeks ago as well as her two friends. I've been told that a specter was behind it.
Oh, you mean a ghost. Then, you're looking for the one of the 3 academy students that disappeared a while ago. They disappeared in Bastion. It's a really spooky place. Several Junin disappeared there decades ago, and one Junin went missing a week ago when an entire squad was deployed to search for the kids. We suspect that a rogue nin is behind it. I see, Naruto whispered to himself, can you take me to this, Bastion?
Why? You don't actually think it's a ghost, do you? She was given a stern look in response. You're crazy. The ghost thing is just a legend. It's obviously just a runaway rogue nin or something, not a ghost. Why do you want to be taken there? It's dangerous, even for someone like myself. Why? Because it's my job. But aren't you related to one of the kids? It's a personal job, he lied. Then tell me who you're related to? The girl, he guessed. I'm related to the girl.
Little Ruka, she questioned. The smaller blonde nodded in return. Fine, I'll give you that, but I won't take you there. Then can you at least tell me where this bastion is? I have a relative to find.
No, she stated. I am not leading a kid to his death, even if he's a little cutie. Naruto blushed, not giving up. Then at least tell me the legend behind the ghost. Tell me who you work for first. I still don't believe that a kid your age hunts ghosts and is trained to the point where he can defeat half a dozen armed Chunin-level shinobi without a sweat. I can't tell you that. Naruto shook his head. But trust me, I can handle whatever is inside the bastion. I'm older than I look. Much older. I can't trust you, Yugito said. And you seem to be misunderstanding something. Even if you can defeat half a dozen Chunin, even if you are a cutie, even if you're treating me with ramen, I am the one in control here. Not you. If you don't tell me the truth as to who you work for, then I will have you arrested and detained until you start telling the truth. I'm sorry, Yugito-san, but I am the one in control here. Naruto motioned underneath the table and revealed a web of seals surrounding the vixen's feet. These seals are similar to the seals those men placed on you. They don't suck away your chakra and you'll still be able to eat your ramen, but you won't be able to walk away. Yugito wondered how the boy found the time to trap her, but she gave the boy a sadistic smile after finishing her bowl. You may have me trapped, kid, but you'd better take a look at yourself.
What? Naruto tried to find out what she was talking about until she motioned to his own feet, which were also surrounded by a set of seals similar to his. He felt sweat running down his back. It looks like we both had the same idea. Two minds are better than one, I guess.
Don't put yourself on my level, kid. The way I see it, you are only high Chunin level while I am a Junin level Kunoichi. You're just a mouse in my trap, kid. Impressive, Naruto frowned, but I still have an ace up my sleeve. Naruto pulled up his cloak sleeve and focused chakra onto his hand. A seal flashed brightly on his palm and he whispered into it, Masters, I found an incooperative source of information. I need backup immediately. I'm at Kumo Bistro, in the mountains south of the cage tower. Who were you speaking to? The blonde said warily.
My saviors. Naruto laughed in response. Great. Yugito face-palmed. Whatever monsters trained this kid were probably more than enough to handle her if the boy's confidence was any indication. Just great.
This is great. Yugito shouted gleefully when she spotted Naruto's masters who didn't wear their cloaks, their handsome features spurring a great lust deep inside the Jinchuriki. Naruto-kun, your masters are hotties. Who the hell is she? Kuru blurted out in annoyance. You're interrupting my drinking time. My masters are also drunkards, apparently, Naruto muttered beneath his breath.
Lyato unsealed the shackle that kept his student in his seat. Explain the situation, Naruto-kun.
Yes, sir. Naruto nodded before stretching. I found this woman. Her name is Ni Yugito. She is a Jinchuriki. I am not certain which tailed best she is, but she's pretty powerful. I followed her to ask her some questions, but I ended up helping her out of a little pickle. He followed me because I'm hot. Yugito corrected, still in her seat, as she hungrily eyed the two master hunters up and down. She let out a sultry growl that no doubt spurred all three males into thinking unclean thoughts.
Hotness aside, Naruto coughed. I saved her life, and she told me that she knew where my relative is, and she told me that there is a legend behind the ghost as well. But, she trapped me in the end. Well, we trapped each other, so I called you guys. All right, Lyato nodded, before punching his brother, who eyed the vixen as she lusted after them. Naruto couldn't help but feel a tiny pang of jealousy at the exchange of looks. If only he was older.
Lyato turned to the blonde female. Okay, Yugito-san. Tell us about the legend. No need to be formal with me, she purred. Anything for hot guys like you too. But, I can't tell you the story without getting out of confinement. A cat has to stretch, you know? Fine then, Lyato nodded to Naruto, who hesitantly undid his seal.
But as soon as he did so, Yugito dashed to grab the boy in defense and came close to snapping his neck if Kuro hadn't sunshined behind her and pinched the side of her own. She fell in a heap after softly muttering, "Party poopers." What an interesting woman, Lyato chuckled. Eyeing us like meat 1 second and rushing to kill our disciple to keep her village's secrets the next.
Woman my ass, Kuru scoffed. She may be sexy as fuck, but no one lays a hand on my disciple. Come on guys, Lyato motioned. Let's take her back to the base. We need to get information out of her as soon as possible. The missing children might still be alive. Damn it, Naruto groaned aloud. He'd be damned if he had to descend bridges and mountains to reach their disgusting excuse of a base again. He didn't care how beautiful Kumo's architecture was anymore. The place needed to be remodeled. Author's note. Wasn't that great? Part 2 should be finished in about a week's time.
Of course, it can be affected due to March break with all the partying and whatnot, but I'll be trying to make my deadlines. Also, I agree with one of the anonymous reviewers that Naruto will be fighting a manticore. In fact, he will be doing so not too many chapters from now on, so I hope you guys enjoy that. I'd do a dragon, but that probably wouldn't happen unless it were late into this FIC. Now, I will be answering some reviews' criticisms.
Jade. Good story. So has Naruto forgotten about the cult and the person that was observing his test? Did he return it to Naruto?
The cult is dangerous and if let it out into the world could do great damage. So was that future foreshadowing I just saw?
Answer. Obviously, the cult is given back to Naruto in this chapter. And yes, it was foreshadowing that you saw. Lednicek. Okay. It took me 5 chapters to review. First of all, nice and original. Second. The first 4 chapter are crap. Make no sense, your constant POV hopping and flashbacks make it impossible to keep up with the storyline.
Third. Naruto is pathetic but that is okay. Fourth. WTF is with the weapon. A celestial being gave it to him and only him and anyone can do with it what they want. One would expect that the ultimate weapon would have some kind of failsafe to keep others from using it. Also, why should Naruto get another weapon and better than a blessed?
Answer. First of all, thank you for being my first real criticism.
It drove me to fix the POV hopping problem. I'd already had a problem before with editing a year ago, but I am a much better writer now. I've actually taken the liberty of editing the past chapters seriously because I know that you guys deserve the best quality in reading, not just pure smut.
And this entire chapter pretty much answered your question, I hope.
Naruto isn't the only being able to use the cult. Anyone can, which can spell disaster for him later on, if it happens.
The fact that anyone can use it and the fact that some people know about it serves as a threat to Naruto's life, which makes for better storytelling than the fanfics out there that gives Naruto an ultimate weapon that makes him a total god.
Naruto's talk with Genma pretty much answers your question as to why Naruto would use a blessed weapon over the cult. If someone finds out that Naruto wields one of the most powerful weapons known to man, everything and everyone connected to Naruto would die, including the Ichirakus and his teammates. The Conclave is a cold and unpredictable organization. They aren't pushovers either, seeing how an average hunter like Yenma can whip Jiraiya's but easily and efficiently.
Critic fan. You should probably know that something like the council can't choose where a person would be buried. But the argument of people disgracing, destroying and disrespecting Naruto's grave and maybe the ones near his can be made. Just saying something like the council refused to allow someone to be buried in a certain spot annoys me to no end, and seeing as you are a good author I thought I should make a mention of that.
Answer. Thank you for reviewing. The council you speak of is different from my council. In this FIC, the council is more realistic. They can petition, pout, threaten, and do things that most corrupt people would do. Use underhanded tactics that give them leverage in fields that they normally don't have access to, including the deaths of shinobi. Besides, don't you think it is more symbolic to end Naruto's ninja career in the same place that it started?
Not payment. So is Naruto going to get any special powers, or is he just going to have to wing it? If it's the latter, he's going to get destroyed. D8 stuck with his current level of training, he has no chance. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video.